The courtroom buzzed with a low murmur as the room filled with reporters, lawyers, and onlookers. It wasn't often that the world's most famous tech mogul, Elon Musk, found himself on the wrong side of the law. Yet, here he was, standing at the center of a case that had the power to topple his empire. His reputation, carefully crafted over years of pioneering innovation in space, electric cars, and technology, was now at stake. The stakes couldn't be higher. Elon's usual confidence seemed a little dimmer today, his eyes darting around the courtroom, noticing the cameras clicking away, the reporters furiously typing, and the heavy presence of law enforcement. Despite his public persona as an unshakable force, the tension in the air was palpable. He could feel the weight of every eye in the room upon him, but more than anything, he could feel the weight of the accusations that hung over him like a dark cloud. Mr. Musk, the judge's voice cut through the murmurs like a sharp knife. The room fell silent in an instant, and all eyes turned toward her. Judge Veronica Harris, renowned for her calm yet commanding presence, was ready to speak. She was no stranger to high-profile cases, but even her reputation hadn't prepared the public for this one. The billionaire who revolutionized the way people thought about electric cars and space exploration was now accused of crimes that could shake the foundations of his empire. Elon straightened, his shoulders back, but even his carefully maintained posture couldn't disguise the tightness in his jaw. This was no ordinary case. This wasn't just about business or corporate policy, this was about a battle for his legacy. Mr. Musk, Judge Harris continued, her voice unwavering, you stand accused of multiple violations of corporate governance, misleading investors, and actions that could have endangered your company's shareholders. How do you plead? The room held its breath, waiting for his response. This was it. The moment that would determine everything. Elon had made it clear in the press that he had no intentions of settling, but what came next would decide whether he'd face the consequences of his actions or walk away unscathed. I plead not guilty, Your Honor. Elon's voice was steady, though there was a hint of something more beneath the surface, determination or perhaps the last remnants of his once impenetrable confidence. There was a brief pause before Judge Harris nodded slowly. She was a woman of few words, but her presence spoke volumes. Her eyes locked on Elon, piercing through him, as if she could see past the bravado to the person beneath. To many, she was an enigma, an unshakable force in the courtroom. But today, she would be something far more dangerous, the equalizer. With a single gesture, she motioned for the prosecution to begin. The lead prosecutor, a tall man with sharp features and an air of practiced intensity, stood and faced the court. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today we will prove that Elon Musk, despite his public image as a champion of innovation and progress, has engaged in reckless and fraudulent practices that have endangered the financial well-being of countless investors. The evidence is clear. Musk's actions were not just irresponsible, they were criminal. The prosecutor's words hung in the air, like the first crack of thunder before a storm. The room was alive with energy now, and the whispers began again, like an ominous wind creeping through the walls. Musk's supporters, who had been sitting quietly, seemed restless, while his critics found their voices, their glares burning with disdain. Elon's legal team, a powerful group of attorneys who had managed to navigate the most complex of corporate cases, stood with him, their expressions professional, but it was clear even they weren't prepared for the magnitude of the challenge they were about to face. They had expected a battle, but not like this. They had anticipated a courtroom drama, but not one that involved the very unraveling of Musk's world. The prosecution continued, outlining the key allegations against Musk, fraudulent claims regarding the performance of Tesla's stock, insider trading, and actions that manipulated the market for personal gain. It was an assault on his integrity, an attempt to strip away the persona he had built with years of hard work and sacrifice. Musk was no stranger to controversy, but this was different. This wasn't about failed launches or Twitter outbursts, this was about potential crimes that could cost him everything. As the prosecution presented their evidence, Elon's gaze shifted toward Judge Harris. There was something about her that unsettled him. She was calm, composed, but there was a sharpness in her eyes, a knowing look that made him question how well he truly understood the system he was fighting. He had spent his entire life breaking down barriers, challenging norms, and disrupting industries, but this was a game he hadn't played before. The room was tense, but then, in a move that no one saw coming, Judge Harris interrupted. "Mr. Prosecutor," she said, her voice cutting through the tension, "I understand the gravity of the charges, but let's not forget that in a court of law, evidence must be more than just accusations. You'll need to provide something concrete, something irrefutable. Without it, these are just words." The prosecutor faltered for a moment, caught off guard by the directness of her challenge. For a split second, Elon allowed himself to breathe a little easier. Perhaps this wouldn't be as straightforward as he had feared. Maybe the judge was on his side after all. But before he could even process the thought, Judge Harris turned her gaze to him. "Mr. Musk," she said, her tone colder than before, "I am no stranger to your public persona. I am fully aware of your status and achievements. But that won't matter here. In this courtroom, your wealth, your status, and your reputation hold no power. The law is the only thing that matters." The finality of her words echoed in Elon's mind, and for the first time in his career, he felt a flicker of uncertainty. "Mr. Musk," Judge Harris continued, "we are about to begin a journey that will uncover the truth. Whether you like it or not, this case will have a profound impact, not just on your future, but on how the world views power and accountability. Do not mistake this as a typical trial. The truth will come to light." The weight of her words settled over him like a thick fog. Musk had always been in control, always in command. But in this courtroom, in front of Judge Harris, he realized for the first time that his power might not be enough. A sense of dread washed over him as the first witness was called. This was no longer about winning, it was about survival. And Musk, for all his intelligence and ambition, was about to face the fight of his life. What happens when the tables turn, and a seemingly unbeatable titan faces his greatest trial yet? Stay tuned. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk had always been a man defined by his unrelenting pursuit of the impossible. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, in 1971, he wasn't destined for the average life. From a young age, he demonstrated a natural curiosity that would lead him to not only explore the limits of technology but also seek to shatter them. Whether it was coding his first video game at age 12, founding the online city guide Zip2, or eventually creating PayPal, the trajectory of his life was always aimed at disrupting the norm. His childhood wasn't an easy one, but it set the stage for everything that came after. His parents had a turbulent relationship, and by the time Elon was in his teens, they divorced. It wasn't a traditional family environment, and this sense of instability seemed to fuel Elon's desire to build something that could stand the test of time. He wasn't just trying to get rich, he was trying to change the world. Elon's move to Canada at 17 to attend Queen's University, before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania, was just the beginning. The world soon began to witness his astonishing drive. There was no room for mediocrity in Elon's life. He would go on to co-found X.com, which would later become PayPal and eventually be sold to eBay for $1.5 billion. But for Musk, that wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. He used the proceeds from PayPal to fund his next great ventures, each more ambitious than the last. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and the Boring Company, all were born out of Musk's unwavering belief that humanity could push beyond its current limitations. SpaceX was his dream to colonize Mars, Tesla was his mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, Neuralink sought to merge humans with AI to fight off the dangers of technological singularity, and the Boring Company was his vision to solve the problem of urban congestion. In many ways, Musk became a symbol of Silicon Valley, the archetype of a brilliant, eccentric billionaire who defied convention at every turn. His work in electric vehicles had revolutionized the auto industry, his rocket company had launched reusable spacecraft into orbit, and he had redefined what was possible for the modern world. His personal life, however, was not as clean-cut. Musk's relationships with the media were strained, to say the least. He had built a brand around himself that was part genius, part maverick, and part rebel. His social media posts, particularly on Twitter, had often ignited firestorms of controversy. His erratic behavior on the platform and his bold statements often sparked backlash from both the public and his investors. Still, his accomplishments overshadowed any missteps, and his loyal followers saw him as a visionary. But the time had come for those same followers to question everything. Behind the headlines, Musk had struggled with personal issues that few knew about. His marriage to Canadian author Justine Musk ended in 2008 after the tragic loss of their first child, Nevada. His relationships with other women, including his highly publicized romances with actress Amber Heard and musician Grimes, were a constant source of media attention. He was often painted as a brilliant but troubled man, caught between his passion for innovation and the demands of his personal life. His children, who were his pride and joy, seemed to be the only aspect of his life that provided stability. His deep love for his 5 sons with Justine, along with his son with Grimes, was often highlighted in rare interviews where he opened up about his personal life. Despite the challenges he faced, Elon Musk remained committed to his family, even though his work would often consume him, driving him to the point of burnout. His personality was, perhaps, as polarizing as his business ventures. Some admired him as a genius who was changing the world, while others saw him as arrogant and disconnected from reality. Elon was not only a businessman, he was a symbol of relentless ambition. However, his vision for the future often came at a price. His impatience with bureaucracy and his disregard for traditional business norms had made him both revered and reviled. Musk was unafraid to take on colossal risks, whether launching a car into space or betting his entire fortune on the success of Tesla and SpaceX. But this willingness to risk it all had earned him a reputation for being reckless. And now, as the courtroom drama unfolded, that very recklessness was coming back to haunt him. As the trial loomed closer, his team was working around the clock to prepare his defense. His lead attorney, David Rockwell, was one of the best in the business, known for his ability to win cases against seemingly unbeatable odds. Rockwell had represented high-profile figures in the past, but none quite like Musk. The odds were stacked against them. The accusations were severe, and the public was already turning on him. But Elon's team was determined to fight, refusing to let this trial define his legacy. Musk, though, was a man with a singular focus. His mind was always a few steps ahead. He wasn't one to let obstacles get in the way of his goals. But this time, the stakes were different. This wasn't just another challenge in his journey of breaking barriers, it was a battle for his very survival. As the days passed, Musk's legal team began to gather evidence and build their case. The allegations were serious: fraudulent claims about Tesla's earnings, misleading investors, and accusations of market manipulation. But the truth, according to Elon, was different. He believed that the entire case was a result of personal vendettas and attacks from those who had long been threatened by his success. He wasn't just defending himself, he was defending his legacy. But as the trial drew closer, Musk couldn't ignore the growing pressure. It was no longer just about the companies he had built, it was about something far bigger. His every move was being scrutinized. His every word was being dissected. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized how much he stood to lose. Where did it all go wrong? Musk would often ask himself in moments of solitude. He had built empires, but now, his empire was at risk. The journey that had brought him to this point was one of triumph and ambition, but it was also one that had made him enemies. And as the legal battle unfolded, those enemies seemed to be closing in, ready to tear down everything he had worked for. But despite the looming uncertainty, Elon Musk wasn't about to back down. He had faced adversity before, and he always found a way to come out on top. His mind was already racing through possible strategies for turning the tide in his favor. If there was one thing Musk had learned over the years, it was this: when the odds are against you, that's when you fight the hardest. The trial had only just begun, but for Elon Musk, the real battle was just starting. The first few days of the trial were nothing short of a media circus. The press had latched onto every aspect of Elon Musk's life, scrutinizing every word and gesture. Headlines splashed across news outlets, calling the case the trial of the century and framing it as the ultimate clash between a billionaire genius and the forces that sought to bring him down. Musk had become a symbol of modern-day innovation, but now, as he sat in the defendant's chair, he found himself the subject of intense criticism and suspicion. Each day, as the trial progressed, the tension mounted. On one side, the prosecution presented evidence that seemed to support their claims. They had subpoenaed internal emails from Musk's companies, including Tesla, showing communications that could be interpreted as misleading investors about the state of the business. There were financial records that raised red flags, particularly concerning Musk's tweets about Tesla's stock prices. The prosecution's case was a careful web of accusations designed to make Musk appear reckless and manipulative. They portrayed him as a man willing to risk everything: his companies, his employees, his investors, just for the sake of maintaining his public image. They even called former employees to testify about Musk's erratic behavior, his unpredictable management style, and how he often ignored standard corporate protocols in pursuit of his grand visions. These were not just business missteps, they were, according to the prosecution, deliberate actions meant to deceive and defraud the public. In response, Musk's defense team was unyielding. David Rockwell, Musk's lead attorney, mounted a strategic defense that attempted to paint the charges as overblown and based on misunderstandings of Musk's unconventional methods. Elon Musk is not a man who is bound by the norms of corporate governance, Rockwell argued in his opening statement. He is a visionary, and sometimes, in the pursuit of that vision, the rules have to bend. Rockwell's approach was to humanize Musk, painting him as a passionate entrepreneur who had revolutionized multiple industries and sacrificed his personal well-being to change the world. His tweets, his spontaneous remarks, his lack of patience for bureaucratic red tape, these were not signs of fraud or malice, but rather the byproducts of a man driven by purpose, a man who dared to dream in ways that most people would never even consider. But the courtroom drama wasn't just about legal tactics. It was about the public perception of Musk, and the narrative was starting to shift. The media frenzy was relentless. Every new piece of evidence, every new witness, felt like another blow to Musk's reputation. His supporters, those who had rallied behind his mission for years, began to wonder, was this really a man fighting for the future, or had he crossed a line into dangerous, self-serving territory? The courtroom was filled with people who had once idolized Musk, and now, they were beginning to ask tough questions. Was Musk truly the hero of the modern age, or was he an arrogant, reckless billionaire willing to risk everything just to stay on top? Elon sat in the defendant's chair, hands folded, as he listened to each damning witness statement. The faces of the jurors remained stoic, their expressions betraying little emotion as the evidence mounted against him. His legal team remained resolute, but even they knew that the case was becoming increasingly difficult to win. The prosecution's star witness came next, a former Tesla executive who had worked closely with Musk. His testimony was designed to land a crushing blow. He spoke of Musk's obsession with perfection, how he pushed his employees to the brink and often ignored sound business advice. He didn't care about the rules, the witness said. He only cared about his vision, and if that meant sacrificing the truth or bending the law, then so be it. The statement hung in the air, and the courtroom grew colder. Musk's defenders immediately attempted to discredit the witness, suggesting that his testimony was driven by personal grievances and jealousy. But the damage was done. Musk leaned back in his chair, a sharp pain settling in his chest. His mind raced. The more he heard, the more he realized how many enemies he had made throughout his rise to the top. It wasn't just corporate rivals anymore, it was people from his own companies, former allies, and colleagues who were now turning on him. How could he have misjudged them so thoroughly? Had his ambition blinded him to the human costs of his pursuit? But Musk wasn't the type to back down. The more the prosecution painted him as a villain, the more determined he became to clear his name. He knew that the trial wasn't just about him anymore, it was about proving that his mission, his life's work, was worth the risk. It was about the future of Tesla, SpaceX, and everything he had built. He couldn't afford to lose, not just for himself, but for the millions of people who believed in his vision for the future. In private moments, however, doubt crept in. His supporters were loud, but his critics were louder. Every headline, every tweet, every courtroom remark seemed to chip away at the carefully constructed empire he had spent decades building. And now, in the midst of the trial, he began to wonder whether it had all been worth it. Had he sacrificed too much in his pursuit of innovation? Had he alienated too many people along the way? During a break in the trial, Elon took a long walk outside the courthouse. The cold air bit at his face, but it felt like a wake-up call. He had built companies that reached the stars, but now, standing outside the courtroom, he felt smaller than ever. The world outside didn't care about his grand ideas or his ambitions, it only cared about what he had done, and whether he had done it right. His thoughts were interrupted when his lawyer, David Rockwell, approached him with a grave expression. "Elon, we need to talk about strategy," he said, his voice low. "What's the latest?" Musk asked, his voice sharp, betraying his growing frustration. "The prosecution is doing their job," Rockwell replied. "They've got the evidence, and it's strong. We need something big to turn this around, something that will shift the narrative." Elon nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. The weight of the situation was starting to settle in. "I know what I've done. But I've always believed in what I'm doing. I've pushed limits. I've gone where no one else would. And I won't apologize for it. We need to remind them why we're here, to build something bigger than ourselves." Rockwell looked at him, concern creeping into his eyes. "I believe in you, Elon. But this is getting bigger than just your reputation. The public's perception is shifting. If we don't act soon, we could lose everything." Elon looked out across the city skyline, his mind racing. There was no turning back now. The fight was on, and if he had to, he would fight until the very end. The trial was no longer just about legal arguments, it had become a spectacle, a modern-day gladiatorial battle in a courtroom. Every day, the media circus outside the courthouse grew larger, as more people flocked to witness the drama unfold. Cameras flashed constantly, capturing every movement, every detail of Elon Musk's expressions, as if trying to dissect him into pieces for public consumption. Musk had always been someone who thrived under pressure. From launching rockets into space to electrifying the automotive world with Tesla, he was no stranger to high stakes. But this trial, felt different. It wasn't just his companies on the line. It was his entire legacy. If he lost this case, the accusations of fraud and manipulation could stick to him like an indelible stain, one that might ruin everything he had worked for. Yet, Musk's usual stoic confidence was beginning to crack. In private moments, he found himself pacing in his office, fighting off the creeping fear that had started to take hold. His mind couldn't help but wander to the one question that now dominated his every thought: what if I'm not invincible? It was a terrifying prospect. For years, he had been the one to disrupt industries, to challenge the status quo, and to never back down from an impossible challenge. But now, as the trial dragged on, it felt as though the forces against him were finally starting to gain ground. Elon's defense team was scrambling, trying to come up with a strategy that could not only disprove the allegations but shift the entire narrative back in his favor. David Rockwell and his team had worked tirelessly, poring over evidence, interviewing witnesses, and planning counterarguments. The media's portrayal of Musk was a mountain of negative press, and it was getting harder for them to push back against it. But then, something unexpected happened. The turning point came on a chilly morning, as the courtroom prepared for another day of testimony. Elon arrived early, pacing back and forth in his private room, lost in thought. He knew today would be pivotal. The prosecution's case had been strong, but it wasn't airtight. There were holes in their narrative, gaps in the evidence they were presenting. And Musk had just the thing to turn the tide. A whisper of a potential breakthrough had reached his ears. One of Tesla's former executives, a key figure in the company's growth, had come forward with new evidence. This person had once been loyal to Musk but had left Tesla under contentious circumstances years ago. At the time, their departure had been a mystery, and rumors had swirled about why they left. Now, this individual was willing to testify for Musk's defense, claiming that much of the information the prosecution was relying on was inaccurate and taken out of context. David Rockwell pulled Elon aside just before the trial began. "Elon, this might be our shot. The former exec, he's willing to testify. We need to act fast, but if his testimony is as solid as he claims, it could change everything." Musk's eyes narrowed. "I've heard about him. He left on bad terms." "I know," Rockwell replied, "but he's bringing something big. He's willing to testify that some of the key evidence the prosecution is using against you is misrepresented or fabricated." Musk considered this for a moment. He had learned over the years that things were never as they seemed. This could be the opportunity he needed to turn the trial on its head. "Let's do it," Musk said firmly. "If he can clear up the mess they've made with those emails and the stock price tweets, we move forward with it." The next few hours felt like a blur. As the trial resumed, the atmosphere was tense, the tension almost palpable. Musk sat at the defense table, a mix of determination and apprehension in his eyes. The jury was already primed to believe the worst about him. He had to give them a reason to doubt everything they had heard so far. Then, the defense called their witness. The former executive, whose name had been kept secret until that moment, stood in the courtroom. His testimony was measured, precise, and aimed at dismantling the prosecution's case bit by bit. The executive began by explaining how Musk's tweets were often impulsive, yes, but not necessarily malicious. "Elon doesn't always follow the usual corporate playbook," the executive testified. "He's driven by his vision, and sometimes, that means making decisions that seem unconventional, even reckless. But the idea that he intentionally misled investors or manipulated stock prices, that's just not true." The defense team showed evidence of emails and communications that contradicted the narrative presented by the prosecution. The executive detailed how certain statements that Musk made on social media were misinterpreted or blown out of proportion. The courtroom was on edge, as the former executive walked them through the chain of events that led to the stock volatility, explaining how Musk's words, though controversial, were often taken out of context by the media. He even produced internal communications from Tesla's board of directors, showing that the company had been transparent with investors about the risks involved, contrary to what the prosecution had suggested. "Are you saying that Mr. Musk's actions were taken out of context and that there was no intent to deceive?" the prosecutor asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. "Exactly," the executive replied, his voice steady. "Elon Musk is not a perfect man, but he is not a criminal. He's made mistakes, but they were never with the intent of misleading anyone." The defense team seized the moment, showing evidence of Musk's commitment to transparency, including Tesla's regular financial disclosures and efforts to improve corporate governance. Slowly but surely, the jury began to shift. The narrative that had been built against Musk was starting to crumble. But then, just when things seemed to be going in Musk's favor, the prosecution unveiled a shocking twist, an internal audit from Tesla that revealed discrepancies in the company's financial records, raising doubts about the true state of the company's financial health. Elon's heart sank as the courtroom fell into stunned silence. This was the moment he feared would come. The prosecution had kept this bombshell hidden until the right moment, and now it was threatening to undo everything his defense team had worked for. The auditor, who had previously been silent throughout the trial, took the stand. His testimony was damning. We found evidence of irregularities in the way Tesla had reported certain financial figures, specifically in regard to profit margins and the valuation of some of its assets, the auditor said. Musk's eyes darted to his defense team, but Rockwell gave him a small nod. This wasn't over yet. Musk had been through many close calls before, and if there was one thing he knew, it was that the game was far from finished. The courtroom grew quiet, and a chill hung in the air. The auditor's words reverberated like a cold wind through the room. Elon Musk's face, once steely with determination, now showed signs of cracking. The accusations were growing more serious, and his defense team was visibly tense, strategizing on the fly. The prosecution's bombshell had landed, and it wasn't just a minor setback, it was a potential game-changer. Elon clenched his jaw, his mind racing. This audit, these discrepancies in the financial records, were not just numbers on a page. They were a direct threat to the entire fabric of Tesla and SpaceX. He had spent years building these companies, pouring everything into their success, and now, here they were, unraveling before his eyes. David Rockwell, his lead attorney, stood up quickly to challenge the auditor's findings. "Your Honor," he said with urgency, "the financial discrepancies the prosecution is referring to have been grossly misrepresented. What we are seeing here are the complexities of a rapidly evolving company. Tesla is no ordinary corporation, it operates in a cutting-edge industry where valuations and profit margins fluctuate significantly. There is no malice here. There is no intent to deceive." The prosecutor, Andrew Langley, was quick to counter. "But Mr. Rockwell, these discrepancies are not just fluctuations. They are serious misrepresentations of Tesla's financial health. And as for Mr. Musk, these actions, whether he intended them or not, led to a massive loss for investors. Misleading the public about Tesla's financial standing is no small matter. It's fraud." Elon's eyes narrowed. He was no stranger to high-pressure situations, but this felt different. The stakes had never been so high. The moment he had been dreading for so long had arrived, the line between success and failure, between hero and villain, had never been so thin. His pulse quickened as the prosecutor continued to hammer at the weaknesses in Musk's defense. "We have emails, statements, and records that show an alarming pattern of behavior," Langley said, pacing the courtroom. Mr. Musk's words on social media, his statements to investors, they were calculated, they were deliberate. He knew what he was doing. This was not a simple mistake, as his defense would have you believe. This was intentional deception. Elon wanted to speak up, to shout at the injustice of it all. But he knew he couldn't let his emotions get the best of him. The courtroom was watching his every move. If he let his frustration show, if he allowed himself to react to the mounting pressure, it would be over. The prosecution had already painted him as a reckless billionaire, someone who would stop at nothing to stay on top. If he lost his cool now, he would be confirming their narrative. Rockwell turned to the jury, his voice steady and calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you are hearing is a distorted portrayal of a visionary. Elon Musk is a man driven by purpose, and yes, he has made mistakes, but they were never made with the intent to harm anyone. His mission has always been to revolutionize industries, to create a sustainable future for humanity. The charges against him are based on a misunderstanding of his methods, not his intentions." But even as Rockwell spoke, Elon's mind was elsewhere. He could hear the doubts creeping in. The discrepancies in the financial records, the email chains, the stock price fluctuations, it all painted a picture of a man willing to bend the truth in order to achieve his goals. And in the eyes of the public, that could be the very thing that brought him down. For a moment, Elon's thoughts flashed back to the beginning of his journey. The countless sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, the impossible challenges he had faced, and yet, somehow, he had always managed to find a way forward. But now, standing on the precipice of a life-altering decision, he felt more vulnerable than ever. The weight of his past mistakes, the sacrifices he had made for his companies, seemed to hang around his neck like an anchor. Had he pushed too hard? Had his ambition cost him more than he was willing to pay? And now, as the trial reached its most critical point, was it too late to make things right? The prosecutor's voice cut through his thoughts, pulling him back to reality. Mr. Musk's defense has been nothing more than a smokescreen to hide the truth. We are not here to argue about his intentions, we are here to establish that his actions had consequences. Consequences that hurt real people. Investors, employees, families, lives were affected by his words, his decisions. It was then that something shifted within Elon. For the first time since the trial had begun, he realized that this wasn't just about defending his reputation, it was about something bigger. It was about the world he was trying to create, the future he was fighting for. The stakes had never been higher, and the outcome of this trial wasn't just about whether he would be found guilty or innocent, it was about the future of technology, innovation, and the bold ideas that had always driven him. Musk stood up, his chair scraping against the floor as he faced the court. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. It was a moment of reckoning. "I've never been a perfect man," he began, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "I've made mistakes, big ones. I've pushed the boundaries of what's possible, and in doing so, I've stepped outside the lines. But I never set out to deceive anyone. I've always been honest about my ambitions, about what I believe we can achieve." His gaze swept across the courtroom, meeting the eyes of the jury. "What we're trying to do, what I've been trying to do, is nothing short of revolutionary. I'm trying to create a sustainable future, to make life multiplanetary, to push humanity to places we've never been before. But I know I've made mistakes along the way. And if I've let anyone down, if I've caused harm in any way, I'm sorry." For a brief moment, the courtroom was still, the weight of Musk's words hanging in the air. But then, slowly, something changed. The sharp tension in the room began to soften. There was no grand apology, no plea for sympathy. Instead, Musk's words were raw, honest, and human. He had acknowledged his flaws, his imperfections, and in doing so, he had shifted the narrative from a man on trial to a man who had fought for something greater than himself. The prosecution, taken aback by the sudden shift in tone, struggled to regain control of the narrative. But the damage had already been done. The jury, the media, and even the public began to see Musk not just as a billionaire with a questionable track record, but as a flawed human being who had sacrificed everything for a dream. The emotional climax of the trial had arrived, and with it, a shift in perspective. The questions that had once been centered on Musk's character were now being replaced by deeper reflections on the price of ambition and the cost of pursuing a vision that could change the world. The trial had reached its boiling point. Every moment felt like it was suspended in time, and the future of Elon Musk hung precariously in the balance. But as the final arguments were made and the last piece of evidence was presented, a profound sense of clarity began to settle in. Elon sat in his seat, his hands clasped tightly in front of him, his mind no longer racing with the chaos of the past few days. The emotional storm had passed, leaving a space where a singular, undeniable truth began to emerge. This was more than just a courtroom battle. This was a pivotal moment in his life, a crossroads between his past, his future, and the legacy he hoped to leave behind. The defense team had presented their final arguments, and now the jury deliberated. It was a tense waiting game. The courtroom, once filled with the noise of testimony and objections, was now quiet, almost eerily so. The press, who had been clamoring for every little detail, were left to whisper among themselves, waiting for the final judgment. David Rockwell stood beside Elon, offering a reassuring smile, but it was clear that even he was nervous. "You did well, Elon," he said quietly, glancing at the jury as they filed out. "No matter the outcome, you've made your case." Elon nodded, though he felt the weight of uncertainty pressing on him. He had faced challenges before, big ones, world-changing ones, but nothing had been as personal as this. It wasn't just his business empire at stake. It was his very character, his credibility, his drive to make the impossible possible. If the jury found him guilty, the ripple effects would spread far beyond the courtroom. They would affect every person who had ever believed in him, every investor who had taken a chance on his vision, and every company that had bet its future on the innovations he championed. After what seemed like an eternity, the jury finally returned to the courtroom. The foreman stood and addressed the judge. The silence was suffocating. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Elon Musk, not guilty on all charges," the foreman declared. The words hit like a shockwave. A collective breath seemed to be released in the room, a wave of relief that swept through Elon's body, leaving him momentarily stunned. Not guilty. It felt surreal, almost like a dream. His mind struggled to process the weight of the verdict, but the cheers, the applause from his supporters, the exhale of tension from his defense team, these were real. Elon felt a wave of emotion rise within him, but he held it back, not wanting to betray the flood of relief and gratitude coursing through him. He had been given a second chance. The judge banged the gavel. Court is adjourned. As the courtroom emptied, Elon found himself standing in front of the media, who were eager to capture every moment of the aftermath. Flashbulbs went off, but this time, there was no nervousness in his posture. There was only a sense of calm. He had fought for his truth, and now, it had been recognized. David Rockwell clapped him on the back. "Well done, Elon. You've come through this, and now, it's time to move forward." But as Elon stepped into the hallway, he couldn't shake the feeling that this trial had changed him. More than just clearing his name, it had forced him to confront something deeper within himself, the pressure of being a public figure, the weight of his own ambition, and the sacrifices he had made along the way. His thoughts drifted to his children, his companies, and the future. He thought about the risks he had taken, the failures he had endured, and the way the world had watched his every move, waiting for him to falter. He had pushed boundaries for years, but now he realized something he hadn't fully understood before. The true test of his character wasn't just about how high he could climb, it was about how he dealt with the fall, how he faced the challenges that threatened to break him. As he walked out of the courthouse, his thoughts turned to the future, and with it, a new sense of purpose. The trial had been a trial of fire, but it had tempered him, made him see the bigger picture. He had always believed in the impossible, in changing the world. But now, he understood that the path to greatness wasn't just about the victories. It was about navigating the failures, the mistakes, and the moments of doubt. It was about learning, evolving, and pushing forward, even when the world seemed against you. And as he looked out at the horizon, Elon knew that the journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. The courtroom was behind him, but Elon Musk could feel the weight of the trial's aftermath pressing heavily on his shoulders. The verdict of not guilty had given him back his freedom, but freedom alone couldn't solve the challenges that still lay ahead. The world outside the courthouse was buzzing with the news of his acquittal, but in his heart, Elon knew this wasn't the end of his journey. It was merely the beginning of something much bigger. In the days following the trial, Elon retreated into his thoughts. He spent less time in the spotlight, less time answering questions from the media, and more time reflecting on his purpose, his legacy, and the direction he wanted to take next. What had the trial taught him? What had he learned about himself, his mission, and the people who followed him? Sitting alone in his office at SpaceX headquarters, Elon stared out at the sprawling compound, watching the rockets being assembled and prepped for launch. The familiar hum of innovation, the very thing that had once driven him forward, was now more than just a reminder of his past successes. It was a call to action. He had always been obsessed with the future. His obsession with Mars, with sustainable energy, with artificial intelligence, it was all about creating a better world for future generations. But in the wake of the trial, he realized something vital: to change the world, you had to change yourself first. The pursuit of progress couldn't be built on ego, deception, or shortcuts. It had to be rooted in authenticity, integrity, and a genuine commitment to making a difference. The phone on his desk buzzed, snapping him from his thoughts. He picked it up, seeing the name of his longtime business partner and trusted confidant, Gwyn Shotwell. "Hey, Gwyn," he said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of everything that had happened. "What's up?" "Just checking in," Gwyn replied. "How are you holding up after all the media frenzy? Are you okay?" Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk. "I'm fine. Just processing everything. You know, a lot has changed in the past week." "I get it," she said. "But listen, we've got to move forward. We have projects in the pipeline that need your attention, and I think it's time we shift gears a bit. We've been focused on the big picture stuff, the grand vision. But now, it's about execution. Let's talk about what's next." Elon took a deep breath. Gwyn was right. It was time to move forward, not just for the companies, but for himself. He had faced the storm, and now it was time to chart a new course, one that embraced lessons learned, a new perspective, and a clearer sense of purpose. "Okay," Elon said after a moment, his voice firmer now. "Let's talk about the future." Over the next few weeks, Elon's focus shifted from defending his name to driving real change. His first priority was SpaceX. They were on the brink of launching the first crewed mission to Mars, and despite the legal battles and public scrutiny, the vision remained clear. Mars was still the ultimate goal. But there was a shift in how Elon viewed the mission now. It wasn't just about reaching Mars for the sake of exploration, it was about the survival of humanity. The Earth was fragile, and humanity needed to find a way to become a multiplanetary species. Elon began spending more time with his engineering team, going over every detail of the Mars mission, not just the technical aspects but the ethical and human aspects as well. What would it mean to colonize Mars? How could they ensure the survival of the people they sent? How would they build a sustainable future on the red planet? "Gwyn, we need to think bigger," Elon said during a meeting one morning. "It's not just about landing on Mars. We need to build a self-sustaining colony, one that can thrive even without constant supply missions from Earth. We can't afford to repeat the mistakes we made on Earth. Let's start planning for the next 100 years, not just the next 10. Gwyn nodded, clearly impressed by the new clarity in Elon's voice. "I think that's the right mindset. You're thinking about legacy now, not just milestones. We're not just launching rockets, we're launching the future of humanity." As the conversation continued, Elon felt something shift inside him. It was a renewed sense of responsibility, but also a sense of optimism. The past few months had been full of uncertainty and challenge, but now he saw the road ahead with a clearer vision. Yes, the trial had been a wake-up call, but it had also given him a new opportunity, a chance to focus not just on success, but on the long-term impact of his work. The media frenzy surrounding the trial eventually died down, but the lessons Elon had learned during that time remained. He began to realize that true leadership wasn't about having all the answers or always being the smartest person in the room. It was about inspiring others to think bigger, to challenge the status quo, and to work together toward a shared goal. With SpaceX moving forward on its Mars mission, Elon turned his attention to Tesla. The electric vehicle company was at a critical juncture. Tesla had already changed the game in the automotive industry, but now it was time to push for something even more revolutionary. Elon's thoughts went back to the original vision of a sustainable future, one where electric vehicles were just the beginning. "Gwyn," he said, during another meeting at Tesla headquarters, "we need to accelerate the development of autonomous vehicles. And not just self-driving cars. Think about fleets of autonomous electric vehicles, operating in smart cities. We can transform the entire transportation system, reduce emissions, and change how people live." "I like where you're headed with this," Gwyn replied. "We've been talking about sustainability for years, but this would be the next step, an integrated, smart network of transportation solutions." It was a grand vision, but Elon had always thrived on big ideas. And as he looked around at the talented people in his companies, he knew that with the right focus and determination, they could make this dream a reality. Tesla's cars were already leading the way in the electric vehicle market, but now it was time to redefine what a car could be, and how it could change the world. As the weeks turned into months, Elon's leadership began to reflect the lessons of the trial. He became more accessible to his teams, more willing to listen, and more focused on the bigger picture. He started to place more emphasis on ethics, transparency, and responsibility, understanding that with great power came great responsibility. But most importantly, he began to lead with a sense of humility that had been hard for him to embrace in the past. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: the road ahead was his to shape. The days after the trial had been a whirlwind, but they had also allowed Elon to recalibrate. His legal battle had been an emotional roller coaster, but now, with the dust settling, he could finally focus on what mattered most: the future. Yet, a new challenge loomed on the horizon, one that was even more difficult to navigate than the courtroom. It wasn't the launch of the Mars mission or the next big Tesla prototype that was weighing heavily on Elon's mind. It was the challenge of trust. Over the course of the trial, the public had seen the cracks in Elon's persona, the doubts cast on his character, and the mistakes he had made. While the not guilty verdict had cleared his name, the damage to his public image lingered. For the first time in years, Elon was acutely aware of how fractured the relationship between him and the public had become. Could he rebuild that trust? Could he regain the confidence of the people who had supported him for so long? And, more importantly, could he forge new connections with those who had written him off as a failure? Elon sat in his office at Tesla's headquarters, gazing out the window at the bustling campus below. The cars on the assembly line were moving with their usual precision, and the engineers were focused on the task at hand. But in Elon's mind, he saw more than just the vehicles being built. He saw a vision of a future that was now in jeopardy, not because of the trial, but because of the lingering doubts that people had about his integrity. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Gwyn. "Gwyn, we need to have a meeting with the board about some of the challenges we're facing in public perception. There's a lot of skepticism about the direction we're taking, especially after the trial." Elon let out a sigh and tapped out a quick response. "Elon, I know. Let's set it up for tomorrow." The next day, Elon met with Gwyn, as well as several other key members of Tesla's leadership team, to discuss the elephant in the room. The mood was tense as they gathered in the sleek, modern boardroom, the large windows framing a view of the factory floor where production continued unabated. "Elon," Gwyn began, looking at him with a mixture of concern and determination, "we all know what happened in the trial. You've come out of it stronger in some ways, but the world doesn't always see it that way. People are still questioning whether you can be trusted. There are growing concerns about whether we can continue to build the kind of forward-looking, world-changing innovations you're known for if we can't restore that trust." Elon sat silently, absorbing her words. He had known this moment was coming, but hearing it from Gwyn, someone who had been by his side for so long, hit harder than he had expected. "I know it's going to take time," Elon finally said, his voice steady but tinged with the weight of the situation. "But we can't just expect people to forget about the trial or the things that happened before. We have to show them that we've learned, that we've changed." Gwyn nodded. "Exactly. And it's not just about Tesla. It's SpaceX, it's Neuralink, it's everything you're working on. If we want to continue to lead, we need people to believe in you, not just your products, but you as a person. We need to be more transparent, more open with our audience, and..." Elon interrupted, "and we need to do more than just talk. We need actions to back up everything we say." "I get it." The room was quiet for a moment as the team processed what had been said. Elon leaned forward, his hands clasped in front of him. "We need to be honest. About the mistakes we've made. About what we're doing now. About how we're going to do things differently moving forward. If people don't trust me, they won't trust Tesla. They won't trust SpaceX. And that's the foundation of everything we've built." "Then let's start by addressing it head-on," Gwyn suggested. "We can put out a public statement, have you sit down with the media for an interview, and really lay out where we're at. Be honest about the road ahead. Elon nodded slowly, considering her words. This wasn't going to be easy, but he knew it was necessary. If he wanted to keep leading the charge for the future, he would need to address the most pressing issue of all, the perception of him as a leader. The following week, Elon appeared on national television for an exclusive interview with a well-respected journalist. The stage was set. The cameras were rolling. And as the interview began, Elon was acutely aware of the weight of every word he spoke. "Mr. Musk," the interviewer began, "you've been through quite a lot recently. The trial, the media frenzy, and now, you're faced with the question of whether the public can trust you to lead. What would you say to those people who are still questioning your integrity?" Elon sat back, taking a deep breath. This was his moment to rebuild, to speak directly to the world. "I've made mistakes," he said honestly, his voice calm yet firm. "I've made decisions that I'm not proud of. But I've always strived to do the right thing, to push the boundaries of what's possible. And I've learned from my failures. I've learned that leadership isn't just about being right or having all the answers, it's about admitting when you're wrong, learning from those mistakes, and constantly working to improve." The interviewer nodded, sensing the sincerity in his words. "So, you're asking people to forgive you?" "I'm asking for understanding," Elon replied. "Forgiveness is earned, not given. But I hope that people can see the work we're doing, the progress we're making, and understand that I'm committed to doing better. Not just for my companies, but for the world." The interview continued, and as it went on, Elon's honesty and transparency began to shine through. The public, it seemed, was ready to listen. By the time the broadcast ended, Elon knew that this was only the beginning of the long road to restoring trust. But it was a step in the right direction. As Elon Musk walked out of the studio, the weight of the interview settled in. He had said the right things, he had spoken with honesty, with vulnerability, and had offered his unflinching commitment to improve. It wasn't going to be an immediate fix, but he hoped it would start to build the foundation of trust that was critical for the future. The next few days were filled with the same buzz of media coverage. Social media platforms, news outlets, and pundits all weighed in on his interview. The reaction was mixed. Some praised his openness, recognizing the hard truths he shared. Others remained skeptical, questioning whether this shift in tone would last. The public's trust would not be easily won back, but one thing was clear, the conversation had shifted. But it wasn't just the public's opinion that Elon needed to focus on. His companies, SpaceX, Tesla, and others, were facing crucial decisions. The technology they developed and the future they envisioned depended on the faith of investors, partners, and employees. He could no longer afford to take that trust for granted. His first move was to call a meeting with his leadership teams, across all his companies. He needed to address them, to reassure them that his vision hadn't changed, even if the world around him had. Gathering in the sleek conference room at SpaceX headquarters, Elon looked around the table at the familiar faces of those who had worked with him for years. Gwynne Shotwell, his trusted partner at SpaceX, sat to his right, her eyes sharp with anticipation. To his left was J.B. Straubel, Tesla's CTO, who had been with him since the beginning. "We've all been through a lot recently," Elon began, his voice steady. "And while the trial is behind us, I know there are still questions, about where we go from here, about the impact on our work, and what this means for our companies." He paused, letting the silence fill the room. The weight of the words hung in the air. Everyone knew how much was at stake. "But what I want to make clear today," he continued, "is that our mission hasn't changed. SpaceX is still about taking humanity to Mars, advancing space exploration, and making a multiplanetary civilization a reality. Tesla is still about leading the world to sustainable energy, and making electric vehicles the norm. And every company we build is going to be focused on making the future better for everyone." Elon could feel the intensity in the room. The faces around him were a mix of concern and hope. They were all looking for direction, a sign that despite the turbulence, they were still heading towards something great. "I know I've made mistakes," Elon said, this time with a humility that had been absent in the past. "But I believe in our mission more than ever. I believe in you all, in the teams we've built, and in the future we are creating. It's time we focus on the work, not just the noise." Gwynne Shotwell was the first to speak up. "We've got a lot of momentum, Elon. We've weathered worse storms than this. If we stay focused on the vision, the world will come around. They always do." J.B. Straubel added, "The technology, the innovation, it's all here. We're still the leaders in our field, and the work we're doing is the future of humanity. We just need to stay the course." Elon nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. The words of reassurance from his team meant more to him than they could know. In a time when his public image was under scrutiny, the support from those closest to him was everything. "I agree," he said. "We've come a long way, and the road ahead will be even more challenging. But it's also going to be even more rewarding. Let's show the world what we're capable of." With renewed determination, Elon and his team dove into their next steps. SpaceX pushed forward with the Mars mission, testing rockets and refining the technologies necessary to send humans to the Red Planet. Tesla doubled down on autonomous driving, accelerating the rollout of self-driving vehicles and exploring new ways to integrate electric cars into smart cities. But while the companies continued their groundbreaking work, Elon's thoughts kept returning to something that had been nagging at him ever since the trial, the issue of public perception. The world's trust could not be rebuilt overnight, and it would require more than just a few interviews and statements. He needed a tangible way to demonstrate the changes he was making, not just internally, but in the way the world viewed him and his companies. One evening, while working late at Tesla's headquarters, Elon found himself sketching on a whiteboard, thinking through the future of energy. How could they move beyond electric cars and into a broader energy ecosystem? What if Tesla became the central player in creating a global, sustainable energy network? He stepped back from the board, his mind racing. Solar energy, energy storage, electric vehicles, it was all connected. But it needed to be more than just a line of products. It needed to be a solution that could change the way humanity consumed and produced energy, on a global scale. He picked up the phone and called Gwynne. "Gwynne, I have an idea," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "What if we created a global network for energy distribution? Not just Tesla vehicles and solar panels, but an entire ecosystem of sustainable energy sources, storage, and distribution. We could integrate everything. Energy could be produced locally, stored efficiently, and distributed around the world." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. "Are you talking about a global energy grid?" Gwynne asked. Elon grinned. "Exactly. It's time to think bigger. We've built the products, but now we need to connect them all. Let's create an energy network that can revolutionize the world's infrastructure." In the days that followed, the idea gained traction. Tesla's engineers and SpaceX's visionaries began to explore how they could make Elon's vision of a global energy grid a reality. The scope of the project was massive, but with the resources of both companies, it was possible. Elon knew this was the kind of ambitious goal that could change the world, and in doing so, help repair the fractured trust between him and the public. It would be a testament to the work he and his teams had been doing for years, a bold statement that no matter the obstacles, they were still the leaders of the future. The global energy grid was not just an idea anymore. It had become a driving force, a tangible mission that would redefine the future of humanity. Elon Musk, the man who had once dreamed of a multiplanetary civilization, was now focusing on something just as ambitious, creating a sustainable energy network that could transcend borders, nations, and even continents. It was a leap of faith in both his companies and in the future itself. As the project took shape, the scope of what was required became clearer. The integration of renewable energy sources, solar, wind, and geothermal, was just the beginning. Energy storage, through Tesla's state-of-the-art batteries, would need to be distributed worldwide, ensuring that electricity could be stored when production was high and used when demand peaked. And with SpaceX's Starlink satellites already in orbit, they could offer an unprecedented communication network to control and distribute the energy efficiently across vast distances. The plan was bold, ambitious, and incredibly risky. But that was the only way Elon knew how to think. If humanity was to have a sustainable future, it was clear that this type of interconnected, global system was necessary. One evening, Elon sat alone in his office, staring at the wall covered in diagrams and notes. There were red lines connecting different ideas, arrows pointing to the key obstacles, and scribbled reminders of critical details that had yet to be solved. He rubbed his eyes and sighed. Despite the excitement surrounding the energy grid project, he knew this would be no easy task. He had faced countless challenges in the past, but the scale of this one was different. The phone rang, cutting through his thoughts. It was Gwyn. "Elon, we've got a problem," she said, urgency in her tone. "The board is questioning whether this global energy grid idea is feasible. They're concerned about the cost, the complexity, and the long-term returns. They want to know if this is a visionary project, or just another pipe dream." Elon closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the situation settle in. He knew this was coming. The risks were enormous, and investors weren't known for being fond of uncertainty. "I understand," he replied, his voice steady. "But tell them this, if we don't take this leap, we're going to be left behind. The world is moving towards sustainability, and we can either lead the charge or watch from the sidelines. We have the technology, the resources, and the talent to do this. It's not a question of whether it's possible, it's a question of whether we're willing to make the investment." Gwyn was quiet for a moment. "I'll handle it, Elon. But you're going to need to show them something concrete. They need a plan, something that proves we're not just shooting for the stars here." Elon nodded to himself, making a decision. "I'll present the plan myself. And I'll do it in a way that they can't ignore. We'll show them what's possible." The next day, Elon took the stage at a high-stakes board meeting. The room was filled with Tesla's top executives and a few of the most influential investors from around the world. Gwyn stood at his side, her face calm but expectant. The pressure was immense, but Elon was no stranger to high-stakes situations. This was, after all, his wheelhouse. "Elon," one of the investors spoke up, "this global energy grid idea, it's grand, but we need specifics. We've heard the vision, but now we need to know how we're going to make this work. The financials, the logistics, the partnerships. You need to convince us." Elon stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room. He could feel the weight of their skepticism, but he also knew that he had one thing they didn't have, the unrelenting drive to make the impossible happen. "I don't have all the answers right now," he began, his voice steady. "But I do know this, the future of humanity is tied to sustainable energy. It's the most important challenge we face. And we're in the perfect position to solve it. Tesla is already leading the charge in electric vehicles and battery storage. SpaceX is building the infrastructure for global communication with Starlink. What we're talking about here is the convergence of these technologies into a global network, a network that will allow us to produce, store, and distribute energy in ways we've never seen before." Elon paced slowly in front of the room, letting his words sink in. He spoke not just about the vision, but about the practical steps they were taking to make it a reality. He laid out plans for partnerships with solar companies, a scalable energy storage system, and the integration of new AI algorithms that would allow the energy grid to be self-sustaining and adaptive to changes in demand. "We already have the technology," Elon continued, his voice filled with conviction. "The question is, how fast can we scale it? How quickly can we build the infrastructure? And how will we finance it? But I believe that with the right investment, the right focus, and the right partnerships, we can make this happen." And in doing so, we'll change the world in ways that go beyond just electric cars or rockets. We'll be leading the world to a future of sustainability. This is the next giant leap for humanity." The room was silent. There were no immediate responses, no questions, only the sound of breathing in the shuffle of papers. Elon stood his ground, knowing that this was his moment. Finally, one of the investors spoke. "Elon, you've always been able to see what others can't. But this is different. This isn't just about business, it's about a global shift in energy. If we're going to do this, we need everyone on board. We need to know that you're committed, and that we're not taking on a project that's going to drain our resources." Elon smiled. "I'm committed. And I'll show you that I'm committed. Let's do this together." Later that evening, as the meeting came to a close, Elon was left with a sense of resolve. The board had agreed to move forward with the project, albeit cautiously, and they would continue to monitor progress closely. It was a win, but only the first step. As he walked out of the conference room, Gwyn approached him, a thoughtful expression on her face. "That went better than I expected," she said, "but we still have a long way to go. The real work starts now." Elon nodded. "The real work is always the hardest part. But this is the beginning of something incredible. A new future for humanity." For the first time in weeks, Elon felt a spark of excitement he hadn't felt in a long time. The road ahead would be tough, but he knew that this leap of faith could change the world forever. And that was exactly what he intended to do. In a world filled with skepticism and doubt, Elon Musk had once again proven that the impossible was only a matter of perspective. With a vision that stretched far beyond electric cars and rockets, he was ready to take the next giant leap, for humanity and for the future. Stay tuned. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one big leap you're ready to take, even when the odds seem stacked against you? Despite the outward success of the global energy grid project, Elon Musk faced battles that few people saw. Behind the closed doors of his office, in the quiet moments between meetings and presentations, the weight of leadership began to take its toll. The energy grid was a monumental undertaking, and while it garnered attention, the practicalities were becoming increasingly complicated. It wasn't just the technology or the funding, those were manageable challenges that Musk had faced countless times before. It was the mental strain, the constant balancing act between personal and professional life, and the relentless pressure of keeping everything moving forward. One evening, as Elon sat in his office at Tesla's headquarters, reviewing the latest projections for the global energy grid, a familiar feeling crept in. It was the same sensation he had felt during the early days of SpaceX when he had risked nearly everything for the chance to make a dent in the universe. He had been there before, alone at the top, carrying the weight of an entire industry on his shoulders. His phone buzzed with a notification, and Elon glanced at it, surprised to see a message from Kimball Musk, his brother, who had always been a steady presence in his life. "Elon, I know you're busy, but I'm worried about you. You've been pushing yourself hard lately. Don't forget to breathe. Family dinner tomorrow at Mom's. You need some time off." Elon stared at the message for a long moment, then set the phone down. His mind raced, torn between the demands of his companies and the knowledge that, as much as he needed the space to recharge, he couldn't afford to step back. There was too much at stake, too many lives depending on his vision. Yet, his brother's words hit him harder than he expected. Kimball had always been the grounded one between them, the person who reminded Elon of the importance of family, of taking moments to connect with those who mattered. But lately, Elon had become so consumed with work that he had neglected his relationships, even those with his closest family. He sighed and rubbed his temples. The weight of the responsibility was becoming unbearable. The global energy grid was ambitious, but it wasn't just a new project, it was the future of his companies, of the planet itself. If he failed, the consequences would be felt for generations. The board, investors, and even the public were all watching, waiting for him to succeed. The stakes were higher than ever before. But was it worth sacrificing everything else? That night, he made a decision. He would attend family dinner. He needed to reconnect with the people who had supported him throughout his journey, not just as a businessman but as a person. And maybe, just maybe, stepping away from the endless stream of emails, meetings, and decisions would give him the clarity he needed. The next evening, Elon drove to his mother's house in the suburbs of Los Angeles, where he and Kimball had grown up. The familiar sight of the house, with its green shutters and sprawling front yard, felt like a step back in time. It was a place of comfort, free from the expectations of the corporate world. As he pulled into the driveway, his mother, May Musk, greeted him with a warm smile. "There you are, Elon. We were starting to wonder if you'd show up." Elon smiled back, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. "I wouldn't miss it," he said, though the words felt foreign on his tongue. It had been far too long since he had made time for these moments. The dinner table was set, and as he took his seat, Kimball raised an eyebrow. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world," he remarked, teasing his brother. Elon laughed, but it was a hollow sound. "Maybe I am," he replied, his tone more serious than he intended. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily, with May leading the discussion, reminiscing about old family stories and childhood memories. The evening was full of laughter and easy camaraderie. For a brief moment, Elon felt himself relax, the weight on his shoulders lightening just enough to breathe. His mother, as perceptive as ever, caught the subtle shift in his mood. She looked at him over the dinner table and asked, "Are you taking care of yourself, Elon? I know you're doing amazing things, but you can't pour from an empty cup." The word struck him harder than he expected. He looked at her, seeing the concern in her eyes, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the full force of how much he had neglected his own well-being. "I'm trying," Elon admitted, pushing his food around his plate. "But it's hard, Mom. It feels like everything is always on the line. The energy grid, SpaceX, Tesla, it all needs me. And if I don't keep pushing, I feel like everything will fall apart." Kimball reached over and placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. "You don't have to do it all alone, Elon. You've got a team, and you've got us. You've got to trust people to help you carry some of the load." Elon nodded, but the truth was, he didn't know how to let go. It had always been him, leading, pushing, taking responsibility for everything. It was his nature, the thing that had driven his success. But in that moment, he realized that maybe he had gone too far. Maybe the vision he was chasing had consumed him in a way that wasn't healthy, not just for him but for those around him. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversation, but Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside him. For the first time in a long while, he thought about what truly mattered: family, balance, and the importance of taking a step back to reconnect with the world outside of his work. The next morning, Elon woke up with a sense of clarity that had eluded him for weeks. He needed to make changes, not just in how he managed his companies but in how he approached life itself. The road ahead was still long and filled with challenges, but he understood now that he couldn't do it all by himself. He picked up the phone and made a call to his executive team. He needed to delegate more. He needed to trust others with the pieces of the puzzle that he had been trying to control alone. "Gwyn, I've been thinking a lot," he said when she picked up. "I've got to start trusting the team more. We need to move faster on the global energy grid, and I can't do it all myself. I'll be more involved with the big decisions, but I need to step back and let everyone else take the lead on the day-to-day operations." Gwyn's voice came through the phone with a note of relief. "Elon, that's exactly what I've been hoping to hear. We've got an amazing team, and it's time for them to step up. You've got to focus on the big picture and the long-term vision." Elon smiled, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. This was the first step toward finding the balance he so desperately needed. It wouldn't be easy, but with the right support, he knew it was possible. As the days passed, Elon began to adjust his approach. He found time to reconnect with his family, to enjoy moments away from the pressure, and to focus on the long-term goals he had set for humanity. The road ahead was still filled with obstacles, but he now understood that success wasn't just about pushing harder, it was about leading smarter and trusting the people around him. As Elon Musk began to delegate more, embracing the idea that he could not carry the weight of the world on his shoulders alone, a new force entered the picture, someone unexpected, yet essential to the success of the global energy grid project. Elon had always been surrounded by brilliant minds, from his engineers at Tesla and SpaceX to the investors who backed his ideas. But this new person was different. They weren't part of the usual inner circle, and yet, they brought something invaluable to the table: experience in geopolitics, a deep understanding of global infrastructure, and a network of contacts that could open doors that even Elon had never thought possible. Her name was Dr. Sophia Lang, a former diplomat and energy strategist who had worked for international organizations and advised governments on energy policies. She had a reputation for getting things done, even in the most politically charged environments. Her expertise in navigating global bureaucracies, along with her connections in both the public and private sectors, made her the perfect candidate to spearhead the partnerships and negotiations that would be critical to the success of the global energy grid. Elon had heard of her before, but he had always been skeptical of anyone who wasn't part of the Silicon Valley ecosystem. He liked things to move fast, and diplomacy rarely had the luxury of speed. But Gwyn had been persistent, pushing Elon to meet with Dr. Lang. "She's the missing piece," Gwyn insisted. "We need someone who can handle the politics and secure the international agreements we need to make this happen." Reluctantly, Elon agreed to a meeting. The first time he met Dr. Lang, it was in a sleek conference room at Tesla's headquarters. She was in her early 40s, sharp-featured with an aura of calm confidence that immediately put Elon at ease. As they sat down to talk, he studied her carefully. She didn't seem intimidated by him, not many people did, but something about her presence made him think that she was used to dealing with much larger players than himself. "Mr. Musk, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me," Dr. Lang began, her voice steady, but with a hint of warmth. "I've been following your work for a while. What you're doing with Tesla, SpaceX, and now the global energy grid, it's a bold, audacious vision. And I think I can help make it a reality." Elon leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "I'm listening." Dr. Lang's eyes glinted with determination. "You've got the technology and the willpower. But this is bigger than just building a system. The political and logistical challenges, securing international treaties, aligning different countries' energy policies, these are just as crucial. Without the right relationships and agreements in place, even the most advanced technology won't get off the ground." Elon couldn't argue with that. His vision was, in part, to create a universal, interconnected energy grid, but getting governments to cooperate and align their interests was another matter entirely. Some countries, especially those with vested interests in fossil fuels, might resist the transition to renewable energy. "How do you propose we navigate that?" Elon asked, genuinely curious. Dr. Lang smiled slightly, sensing the opening. "I've worked with dozens of governments, major energy players, and financial institutions. I've built relationships at the highest levels, and I understand how to make these kinds of collaborations happen. The key is to approach each country individually, find out where their interests align with yours and tailor your strategy accordingly. And, more importantly, make it clear that the future is renewable energy. Not just for the planet, but for their economies, too." Elon raised an eyebrow. "So you're saying we need to sell them on it? Convince them that this is the future?" "Exactly. They're not going to give up their vested interests for the greater good overnight. But you can show them the benefits. This is about showing them that renewable energy will bring jobs, growth, and a sustainable future. And you have the technological proof to back it up." Elon thought for a moment. "And you think you can get them to sign on?" "I do," Dr. Lang said firmly. "But it's going to take time. There will be setbacks, and it won't always be easy. But I'm confident we can make this happen if we can get the right countries on board first. Elon nodded. All right, let's do it. We can't afford to wait any longer. This needs to happen. As the conversation continued, Elon realized that Dr. Lang wasn't just another bureaucrat. She understood the urgency, the stakes, and the technology behind his vision. Most importantly, she had the skills and the connections to make the deals that would bring the energy grid to life. It was the perfect partnership. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Lang became a key player in the project, working closely with Elon and his team to build international support. She traveled extensively, meeting with leaders from countries across the globe, securing agreements, and laying the groundwork for the diplomatic framework that would be necessary for the global energy grid to succeed. While Elon remained focused on the technical side, ensuring that Tesla's solar and battery technology could meet the energy demands, Dr. Lang was busy forging relationships that would allow Tesla and SpaceX to expand their reach beyond the United States. One of her first major breakthroughs came in a meeting with the leaders of several Middle Eastern nations. These countries were traditionally heavily invested in fossil fuels, and convincing them to transition to renewable energy was no small feat, but Dr. Lang had done her homework, understanding the delicate balance of power and economics in the region. Imagine, she told them, a world where you're not just exporters of oil, but leaders in renewable energy. Your countries could become the centers of innovation in solar energy, battery storage, and even space-based infrastructure. We're not just talking about the next 5 years. We're talking about a future where your economies thrive in a new, sustainable world. It was a hard sell, but it worked. Slowly, over time, Dr. Lang secured partnerships and agreements from countries around the world, and the global energy grid began to take shape. Back in California, Elon sat in a meeting with Gwyn and the rest of his team, reviewing the progress of the project. The momentum was undeniable. We're making progress, Gwyn said, her voice full of optimism. Dr. Lang's been incredible. She's locked in partnerships with Europe, parts of Africa, and now the Middle East. If this continues, we could have the infrastructure in place within the next 5 years. Elon smiled. That's exactly what we need. But it's still just the beginning. The technology is ready. The politics are falling into place. Now we have to ensure we can scale it, make it sustainable long term. Not just scalable, Gwyn added, but adaptable. It's going to be a living system, one that evolves with the needs of the planet. Elon's eyes glinted with excitement. Then let's build it. Let's make it happen. As the global energy grid project gained momentum, Elon Musk and his team were confronted with a new challenge: public perception. While the political and diplomatic negotiations were moving forward, and the technology itself was ready to revolutionize the world's energy landscape, there was an ever-growing wave of media scrutiny that threatened to derail everything. The media had always had a love-hate relationship with Elon. He was a visionary, a genius in the eyes of many, but also a polarizing figure. His public statements, whether about artificial intelligence, the colonization of Mars, or the global energy grid, often stirred controversy. He wasn't afraid to make bold claims, but that very audacity made him a target. And now, with the stakes higher than ever, the media had taken an intense interest in the global energy grid. Headlines read, "Elon Musk's energy grid, a new dawn or a dangerous gamble," and, "Can Musk's solar ambitions really change the world?" The world was watching, half in awe, and half in skepticism. Elon sat in his office late one night, reviewing a series of articles that had just been published. Most were positive, touting the ambition of the project and its potential to change the world. But there was an undercurrent of doubt in many of them. Some questioned whether Musk's vision could truly scale to the global level, while others focused on the political complications. How could Musk, a businessman, negotiate energy deals on behalf of countries with conflicting interests? Was his plan too idealistic? Gwyn walked in, sensing the tension in the room. "It's tough out there, huh?" she asked, her voice soft but understanding. Elon leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. It's more than tough. The media's out to get me. They always twist things. One minute, they're calling me a genius, the next, I'm a reckless entrepreneur with too much power. Gwyn smiled slightly. You knew this would happen. You're playing a game bigger than any of us. The media's job is to create drama. It's not about truth, it's about views. Elon stared at the screen in front of him, the weight of the criticism bearing down on him. I can handle the criticism. What worries me is how it's going to affect the global energy grid. We need public support to make this work. If they turn against me, it could derail everything. I get it, Gwyn said, her expression turning serious. But think about it, this isn't just about you. This is about the future of energy. The media can't define what this project will be. The people will. We have to focus on the long game. Elon sighed, but the idea made sense. He had always been willing to take risks, and this project was no different. If he allowed the media to dictate the course of his actions, he would never get anywhere. But even as he acknowledged this, he knew that there was a way to use the media, to turn it into an ally instead of a foe. A few days later, Elon decided to take a different approach. Instead of hiding from the media's questions, he would confront them head-on. He arranged for a high-profile interview with one of the most respected journalists in the industry, David Stern, a veteran reporter known for his investigative work on the tech industry. If Elon could convince Stern of the sincerity and potential of his global energy grid, maybe the media would start to see the bigger picture. The interview took place in one of the sleek, minimalist rooms at Tesla's headquarters. Stern, a no-nonsense journalist, was known for being tough but fair. He had spent years covering Silicon Valley's biggest names, but he had never fully embraced Elon Musk's ambitions. He respected Elon's achievements, but he was wary of the hype that followed him everywhere. Elon sat across from Stern, the weight of the interview pressing on him. He had prepared himself for tough questions, but he had never been more determined to get his message across. Mr. Musk, Stern began, leaning forward, you've spent your entire career disrupting industries, space, electric cars, and now energy. But there's skepticism. Many people think your global energy grid is a pipe dream. What makes you believe this is possible? Elon took a deep breath. This was the moment to change the narrative. It's possible because the world needs it, he said, his voice steady. We can't keep going down the same path we've been on. The way we produce and consume energy is broken. If we don't take action now, we'll be dealing with irreversible consequences in the next few decades. I'm not just doing this to change the game for Tesla or SpaceX. I'm doing this for the future of the planet. Stern raised an eyebrow. But what about the challenges? Politics, regulations, and the sheer scale of this project, how can one person, or even one company, solve all of these problems? Elon nodded, acknowledging the question. You're right. It's not just about me. It's about the team we've built, the partnerships we're forging, and the technology we're developing. I know it's not going to be easy. We've already faced setbacks. But we have a plan, and it's a plan that will evolve as we go forward. It's not a quick fix, it's a long-term vision. Stern leaned back in his chair, considering Elon's words. But the critics are out there. Some say that the project is too ambitious, that it's a gamble with too many moving parts. How do you respond to them? Elon met Stern's gaze. I've never been afraid of big risks. I've always believed that if you're not pushing the boundaries, you're not doing anything worth doing. This isn't just a gamble, it's a necessary leap. The world can't keep running on fossil fuels. We need renewable energy on a global scale. And if we don't start now, we'll be stuck in the past. I'm willing to take the heat, to face the scrutiny, because I believe in this. And I believe the world will come around. Stern paused, the silence hanging in the air for a moment. Then, finally, he spoke. "All right, Elon. I think I get it. This is more than just a business venture for you, it's a mission." Elon smiled. "Exactly. It's a mission to change the world." The interview aired the following week, and the response was immediate. While some critics remained skeptical, many others were impressed by Elon's candidness and his vision. The tone of the media began to shift slightly. No longer was Elon just seen as an eccentric billionaire, he was a leader, someone who was willing to take risks for the greater good. Public perception began to turn in his favor. Articles started to appear about the potential benefits of renewable energy, the role of technology in solving global problems, and the importance of visionary leadership in uncertain times. People were beginning to see that the global energy grid wasn't just a pipe dream, it was a real possibility. But the battle was far from over. The media was fickle, and public opinion could change in an instant. Elon knew that the real work was still ahead of him. As he walked out of the interview, he looked at Gwyn, who had been waiting for him outside. "How did it go?" she asked, her eyes filled with curiosity. "I think we're on the right track," Elon replied. "But we've still got a long way to go." Just when Elon Musk thought things were going smoothly, a shadow of doubt began to creep in. The global energy grid was gaining momentum, the media was turning in his favor, and his partnerships were starting to solidify. But as always in Elon's life, things were never as simple as they seemed. It all started with a phone call. Elon was in a meeting at Tesla's headquarters when his phone buzzed with an incoming message from his trusted advisor, Gwyn Shotwell. The message was brief but alarming: "We need to talk. Urgent." Elon excused himself from the meeting and dialed her number immediately. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice steady but with a hint of concern. "I've got some bad news," Gwyn said. "There's been a breach. Someone in the inner circle has been leaking confidential information about the energy grid project. It looks like it's coming from within." Elon froze. "What do you mean by leaking? Who's behind it?" "I don't know yet," Gwyn replied. "But I've had the team digging into it, and we've traced it back to one of our high-level executives. Someone very close to you." Elon's heart raced. He had worked hard to build this project from the ground up, and the thought that someone close to him was sabotaging it made him sick. "Do you have any idea who?" "We're still investigating, but I'm afraid it's someone from the political and negotiation side of things. A few of our deals are being undermined by this leak, and we're seeing a lot of unnecessary pressure from the very governments we're trying to work with." Elon's mind raced. How could this happen? He had surrounded himself with the best people, people he trusted implicitly. This was his vision, his dream. The energy grid wasn't just a business venture, it was his legacy. Someone was trying to destroy it. "I'll handle it," Elon said firmly. "Get me the details. I'll deal with whoever this is." Within hours, Elon was face to face with the individual who had been leaking the confidential information. His name was Robert Kingsley, a seasoned strategist who had been instrumental in securing several of the international agreements for the project. He was a man with a calm demeanor, a silver tongue, and the kind of political savvy that had made him invaluable to Elon. But now, sitting in the stark white office of Tesla's headquarters, Robert seemed different. His usual air of confidence had been replaced by something darker: anxiety, guilt, perhaps even fear. He had always been the picture of professionalism, but now, as Elon studied him, there was something off. "I never thought it would come to this, Elon," Robert said, his voice quiet but full of tension. "You have to understand, I didn't want it to go down this way." Elon's gaze sharpened. "What are you talking about?" "I trusted you, Robert. You were key to this project, to this whole vision. And now, we're dealing with leaks, political pressure, and sabotage. What the hell is going on?" Robert swallowed hard, then met Elon's eyes, his face a mix of guilt and shame. "I didn't mean for things to go this far. But the pressure from the government deals, it's too much. They want control, Elon. They want a piece of this project, and they're using their influence to get it. I had no choice. They promised me things, power, wealth, influence. I thought I could use it to help us, to get ahead. But it's all been a lie. Elon's stomach dropped. Robert had been bought out. The very man who had helped build the international agreements had been lured into corruption, selling out the future of the global energy grid for his own gain. So you've been leaking our strategy? Elon asked, the anger rising in his chest. You've been undermining the entire project to benefit yourself. Robert's face flushed with shame. I never wanted to hurt you, Elon. I thought I could control the situation. But it's out of my hands now. The governments, they're putting too much pressure on us. I didn't think it would spiral like this, but they're calling the shots now. Elon stood up, the weight of the betrayal heavy on his shoulders. He had known that politics would be a challenge, but this was something else entirely. Someone had been playing both sides, working against him and the mission in ways he hadn't even imagined. Get out, Elon said coldly. You're done. You've betrayed us. There's no coming back from this. Robert's eyes widened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he nodded slowly, the weight of his own actions sinking in. Without another word, he stood up and left the room, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Elon sat back down at his desk, the adrenaline rushing through his body. His mind was spinning. He had trusted Robert. He had built the project with people like him in mind. People who believed in the mission, people who understood the stakes. But now, the very core of the project had been compromised. He had been betrayed, and this wasn't something he could easily fix. The next few days were a blur. Elon worked closely with Gwyn and the rest of the team to figure out the full extent of the damage. Robert had not only leaked sensitive negotiations, but he had also actively sabotaged several of the project's key partnerships. There were government officials pulling back from their agreements, and corporate allies who were now hesitant to continue their involvement. The worst part was that the damage wasn't just financial, it was personal. Elon had believed in Robert. He had trusted him with the most important project of his life, and now, that trust had been shattered. But Elon knew one thing, he couldn't let this derail everything. He had come too far to let one man's betrayal stop the global energy grid from becoming a reality. The next step was clear, he had to regain control, rebuild trust, and find new allies. There were too many people counting on him, too many lives that could be changed for the better by this project. He wasn't going to let Robert, or anyone else, destroy that. Elon called a meeting with the senior leadership team. Gwyn, Dr. Lang, and the rest of the executives gathered in the conference room. Elon stood at the front, looking at each of them with a stern, focused expression. We've had a setback, Elon began. But we're not going to let this stop us. We'll fix this, and we'll come out stronger. The world needs the global energy grid now more than ever. I need your help. We're going to rebuild trust, forge new alliances, and finish what we started. There was silence in the room as everyone absorbed his words. Then, one by one, the team nodded in agreement. This betrayal would not define them. They would rise above it, and together, they would make sure the global energy grid was completed, no matter the cost. The fallout from Robert Kingsley's betrayal wasn't just a personal blow to Elon Musk, it was a threat to the entire global energy grid project. With key political partners pulling back and internal confidence shaken, the path forward seemed steeper and more uncertain than ever. But Elon was not a man to wallow in defeat, no matter how deep the cut. He had faced crises before, and each time, he found a way through. This time, it would be no different. In the days following the betrayal, Elon threw himself back into work, harder than ever. He and Gwyn met with diplomats, corporate partners, and government officials to reassure them that the project was still viable. The leaks had been contained, and Robert Kingsley had been removed from the equation. They needed to rebuild trust, and quickly. Gwyn stood by his side every step of the way, providing the calm and steady leadership that Elon sometimes lacked in moments of crisis. Together, they crafted new strategies for the energy grid, reaching out to new allies who believed in the vision of a clean, sustainable future. But even as they spoke to new partners, the shadow of the betrayal loomed large. There were whispers of doubts among their allies. Was this project too big? Was Musk's ambition too grand? Could they really pull off such a massive and unprecedented undertaking? Elon could feel the pressure mounting. But his resolve was unshakable. One evening, after a particularly grueling round of meetings with potential investors, Elon sat alone in his office, staring at a holographic display of the global energy grid. The sleek lines of the project design glowed softly against the darkness of the room. He ran his fingers through his hair, trying to quiet the storm of thoughts in his mind. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Gwyn entered, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You've been at this for hours," she said, setting the coffee down on his desk. "You need to take a break." Elon glanced up at her, the exhaustion in his eyes clear. "I can't stop now. We're losing ground, Gwyn. People are starting to doubt us. The media's turned, some of our partners are pulling back, and I don't know who I can trust anymore." Gwyn shook her head and sat down across from him. "You're not alone in this. You have me, the team, and the people who believe in you. We've been through worse. Remember the early days of Tesla? SpaceX? You didn't get here by giving up." Elon smiled faintly at the memory. The journey had always been uphill, full of obstacles that seemed insurmountable. But somehow, he had always found a way through. "You're right," he said quietly. "We've faced impossible odds before. And I won't let a setback like this stop me now." Gwyn's eyes softened. "I know. But remember, this is more than just a project. It's your legacy. And a legacy doesn't get built in a day. We've got time, Elon." He nodded, his thoughts drifting back to the bigger picture. The global energy grid was more than just an energy solution, it was a lifeline for the planet. The risks were enormous, but so were the rewards. If they succeeded, they would change the course of history. As the weeks passed, Elon and Gwyn worked tirelessly to patch up the cracks in the project's foundation. They launched a new public relations campaign, emphasizing the environmental benefits of the global energy grid. They spoke about the new partnerships they had forged, bringing in top scientists and engineers to strengthen the credibility of the project. Behind the scenes, however, the political and corporate pressure was building. Powerful stakeholders, who had once shown unwavering support for the grid, were beginning to question Musk's ability to deliver. The betrayal had created a ripple effect, and now every deal was more tenuous than before. But just as things seemed to be spiraling out of control, a new opportunity presented itself. One afternoon, Gwyn walked into Elon's office with a look of cautious optimism on her face. "You're going to want to see this," she said, handing him a tablet. The screen showed a message from an influential figure: "I want to meet. Let's talk about the grid. It's time we had a conversation." Elon read the message several times, unsure of who could be reaching out with such an offer. The name at the top of the message stopped him cold. It was Gabriel Tanaka, a prominent billionaire investor with strong ties to governments around the world. He had the kind of political and financial influence that could make or break the project. And now, he was offering to meet. "What's the catch?" Elon asked, already suspicious. Tanaka wasn't the kind of man to do something without expecting something in return. "I don't know," Gwyn replied, her brow furrowed. "But we have to take the meeting. He's a key player in international energy politics. If we can win him over, it could change everything." Elon didn't hesitate. "Let's set it up. We need every advantage we can get." The meeting with Gabriel Tanaka was set for the following week in New York City. Elon and Gwyn flew in, preparing for what was sure to be a high-stakes conversation. The tension between them was palpable. They both knew that Tanaka's support could shift the momentum of the project. But they also knew that he wouldn't come without asking for something in return. As they arrived at Tanaka's office, a towering glass skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan, Elon couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a meeting with a potential investor, it was a meeting with someone who could either make or break their vision for the global energy grid. Inside, Tanaka was waiting. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his demeanor cool and calculated. He offered Elon a handshake as they sat down, the tension in the room thick. "I've been following your work, Elon," Tanaka began, his voice smooth. "I'll be honest, at first, I wasn't sure if the global energy grid was something that could actually work. But now, I'm intrigued." Elon leaned forward, sensing the opportunity. "We're at a critical point, Gabriel. This project has the potential to change the world. We can bring clean energy to every corner of the globe. But we need the right partnerships, the right support. We need people who believe in the future we're trying to build." Tanaka smiled slightly. "That's what I'm here to talk about. But you see, Elon, nothing in this world comes free. If I'm going to commit to this project, there's something I need from you." Elon's heart skipped a beat. Here it comes, he thought. What's the price for his support? Tanaka continued, "I want a seat at the table, Elon. I want a major influence in the decision-making process. I've got connections with governments, energy companies, and global leaders. I can help you navigate the political minefield. But I need something in return, a voice that matters in how this project evolves." Elon considered his words carefully. Tanaka's offer was tempting. A partnership with someone like him could secure the future of the energy grid. But it came at a price: control. "I understand," Elon said, his voice measured. "But I'm not willing to compromise the vision of this project. This is about the planet, not power or influence." Tanaka's eyes glinted with amusement. "I'm not asking you to compromise your vision. I'm asking for a partnership. We can do this together, on our terms." Elon looked at Gwyn, who gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. This was the chance they needed. "We're in," Elon said, sealing the deal with a handshake. Elon Musk had never been one to shy away from difficult decisions. In fact, the tougher the challenge, the more it seemed to fuel him. But as he sat across from Gabriel Tanaka, his mind buzzed with a mix of unease and calculation. The deal had been struck. Tanaka would be an official partner in the global energy grid project, but at a steep cost: influence over the project's direction. The words "we're in" had sealed the deal, but Elon knew this was only the beginning. The real challenge was navigating the storm of power, politics, and corporate interests that lay ahead. The next few days were a whirlwind. The deal with Tanaka opened new doors, but also brought with it new pressures. Tanaka's influence in government circles and multinational corporations was undeniable, and his presence in the project was already being felt. He wasted no time making his mark, pushing for quicker approvals and demanding more immediate returns on the investments. Elon was well aware that with power came conflict, and Tanaka wasn't shy about leveraging his connections to get what he wanted. But for all the advantages that Tanaka's involvement brought, Elon couldn't shake the nagging feeling in his gut. There was something about the deal that didn't sit right. Tanaka's smooth charm, his easy smile, it all felt too calculated. Elon had dealt with enough power-hungry people to know when someone was playing a bigger game. Despite his misgivings, Elon focused on moving forward. The energy grid project had never been more visible to the world. Headlines were touting the bold new initiative, global governments were beginning to take notice, and investors were lining up. But as the momentum built, so did the tension. The media started to question Elon's motives, his decision-making, and the ever-growing involvement of powerful corporate interests. One night, as Elon was sitting in his office, sifting through reports and emails, Gwyn walked in, her expression serious. "Elon, We need to talk, she said, sitting down across from him. Elon put his tablet down and met her gaze. What's going on? We've got a problem. A big one. Elon's stomach dropped. What happened? It's Tanaka, Gwyn said, her voice low. There are rumors swirling about his other business interests. We've been digging into his financial connections, and we found some red flags. Elon's eyes narrowed. What kind of red flags? His investments, Elon. It's not just the energy sector he's involved in. We're talking about defense contractors, private security firms, companies with deep ties to controversial governments. Some of these deals could be linked to unethical practices. It's starting to look like he's not just in this for the energy grid. Elon felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying Tanaka's using this project to gain influence for something else? Is he pushing his own agenda? Gwyn nodded, her expression grim. That's what it's starting to look like. We need to figure out what's really going on. If we're going to work with him, we need to understand his motives, and fast. Elon knew that if the rumors about Tanaka were true, the entire project could be at risk. The global energy grid wasn't just a business venture, it was a vision for the future of the planet. And if Tanaka had other, less noble intentions, it could derail everything. He called for an emergency meeting with his inner circle, the core team that had been with him from the beginning, Gwyn, Dr. Lang, and a handful of other trusted advisors. They gathered in the conference room late that night, the weight of the situation hanging heavily in the air. We need to confront Tanaka, Elon said, his voice steely. We need to get to the bottom of this, before it's too late. But Elon, Dr. Lang interjected, what if we're wrong? Tanaka's been instrumental in opening doors for us. If we make the wrong move, it could set us back months, even years. I don't care about the setback, Elon replied sharply. What I care about is the integrity of this project. We can't afford to be linked to any shady dealings. If Tanaka's playing us, we need to know now. Gwyn looked at Elon, her eyes filled with concern. I agree. But how do we confront him without tipping our hand? If we approach him too aggressively, we risk losing his support, and his influence. Elon stood up, his mind already working through the options. We don't confront him yet. We gather the evidence we need first, then we go in with the facts. I don't care how influential he is, if he's playing a game, I'll expose it. Gwyn nodded. I'll get our team on it. We'll start digging into Tanaka's financials, his partners, and anything that could be linked to his other ventures. The following days were filled with sleepless nights, as Gwyn and the team worked tirelessly to uncover more about Tanaka's business dealings. Meanwhile, Elon continued to focus on the project, ensuring that the work was moving forward and that the energy grid was making progress despite the growing uncertainty. But the cracks in the foundation were starting to show. As Gwyn had predicted, there were more than just rumors about Tanaka. Elon's team uncovered ties to several government contracts that seemed unusually lucrative, particularly with countries that had a reputation for questionable ethics and human rights records. There were also connections to private security firms that had been involved in controversial operations overseas. The deeper they dug, the more unsettling the picture became. Elon couldn't ignore it any longer. Tanaka was playing a much bigger game than anyone had realized. One evening, as Elon and Gwyn were reviewing the latest findings, Elon's phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Tanaka. Mr. Musk, Tanaka's voice came through, smooth and calm, but with an undertone of something darker. We need to meet. Elon's pulse quickened. This was it, the confrontation he had been preparing for. I'll be in New York in the morning, Tanaka continued. I suggest we have a face-to-face discussion about the future of the energy grid. Elon took a deep breath. I'll see you then, he replied, the words coming out cold and deliberate. The next morning, Elon and Gwyn flew to New York for the meeting. This was no longer just a conversation about business, it was a high-stakes battle for control. Elon had no intention of letting Tanaka manipulate the global energy grid project for his own gain. They met at a sleek, private office building in downtown Manhattan, the kind of place where deals of enormous significance were made. Tanaka was waiting for them, sitting at a large glass table, his expression unreadable. "Elon," he greeted him, his smile more strained than usual. "It's good to see you." "Gwyn." He nodded toward her, but his eyes never left Elon. Elon took a seat across from him, his posture straight and unwavering. "Let's get to the point, Tanaka. I know what you're up to. The connections, the shady deals, the influence you're trying to exert over this project. I'm not going to let you use the global energy grid for your own gain." Tanaka's smile never wavered, but there was a glint of something dangerous in his eyes. "Elon, you're mistaken. I'm here because I believe in this project, just as you do. But there are forces at play, and if we're going to succeed, we need to be strategic." Elon leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "I didn't sign up for this, Gabriel. I signed up for a vision for the future of clean energy. If you're not on board with that, then this partnership ends today." For the first time, Tanaka's calm facade cracked. His eyes narrowed. "You don't know what you're up against. If you think you can pull this off without me, you're deluding yourself." Elon met his gaze without flinching. "Try me." The tension in the air was palpable. The meeting with Gabriel Tanaka had been a showdown, one that Elon Musk never thought he would have to face. As the two men locked eyes, each knowing the stakes of what was being discussed, Elon felt the weight of everything he had worked for pressing down on him. The global energy grid project wasn't just his ambition, it was a vision for a new future. But now, with Tanaka's involvement turning into a potential minefield, Elon had to ask himself, was this deal worth it? After the meeting, Elon and Gwyn walked out of Tanaka's office with a heavy silence hanging between them. They had come face to face with the dark side of power, and the realization had been unsettling. Tanaka was no ordinary businessman. He had connections that reached far beyond the energy sector, and his influence was not to be underestimated. But as disturbing as this was, it only fueled Elon's resolve to expose the truth. Back at the hotel, Elon sat down in front of his laptop, scanning through the files Gwyn's team had gathered. It was clear that Tanaka had been playing a much larger game, using the global energy grid as a bargaining chip for his other business interests. And while the specifics of his dealings were still unclear, there were enough red flags to confirm that Tanaka wasn't in this for altruistic reasons. "Gwyn, we need to dig deeper," Elon said, his voice low and determined. "If we're going to take him down, we have to be thorough. We can't afford any mistakes." Gwyn nodded in agreement. "I'm already putting together a team of experts to trace the connections. We'll get to the bottom of this, Elon. We always do." The following days were a blur of research, meetings, and quiet tension. Elon and Gwyn both knew that time was running out. The global energy grid project was already facing skepticism, and any hint of scandal could shatter what little trust they had left with their allies. Every moment felt like a ticking clock, with Tanaka's manipulations hanging over them. But then, just when things seemed to be spiraling out of control, they uncovered something that would change everything. Gwyn burst into Elon's office one afternoon, holding a folder in her hand. "Elon, you need to see this," she said urgently. "We've found something." Elon stood up immediately, his heart racing. "What is it?" She laid the folder on his desk and opened it, revealing a series of emails, financial documents, and wire transfers. The evidence was damning: Tanaka's involvement in several illegal arms deals, as well as connections to corrupt government officials and private mercenary groups. It was all carefully hidden behind layers of shell companies, but it was clear now, Tanaka wasn't just manipulating the global energy grid for financial gain, he was using it as leverage in a much darker game. "Elon, this is it. This is the smoking gun," Gwyn said, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Tanaka's not just a businessman, he's a criminal. And we've got everything we need to expose him. Elon's mind raced as he processed the information. He had known that Tanaka was a powerful man, but this was far beyond anything he could have imagined. Tanaka wasn't just playing a game for influence, he was involved in illegal activities that could bring down entire governments. This changes everything, Elon muttered. We can't just expose him to the public. He'll destroy us before we can even get the word out. Gwyn's face was pale. We'll need a plan, something that takes Tanaka down without putting the project at risk. If we go public too soon, it could bring everything crashing down. Elon paced back and forth, his mind spinning. He needed to act quickly, but carefully. The global energy grid was too important to be derailed by a scandal. He had to expose Tanaka, but without drawing attention to the project's vulnerabilities. It was going to be a delicate operation. The next few days were a whirlwind of secret meetings, covert phone calls, and strategy sessions. Elon, Gwyn, and their trusted team of advisors worked tirelessly to develop a plan that would expose Tanaka's criminal activities without jeopardizing the global energy grid project. They decided to reach out to a select group of allies, people who had the power to take down Tanaka without making a scene. Elon's connections in the government and tech world could help them navigate the political minefield. They had to make sure that Tanaka's illegal dealings were exposed to the right people, without triggering a media frenzy that could take down the entire project. Finally, after what seemed like endless hours of strategizing, the plan was in place. Elon and Gwyn had made their move, quietly handing over the evidence to the right authorities and ensuring that Tanaka's criminal activities would be investigated. But just as they were preparing to move forward, a phone call from an unexpected source threw everything into turmoil. Elon's phone rang late one night as he was going over the final details of the plan. It was an encrypted number, one he didn't recognize. Elon Musk, a voice on the other end asked. Yes, who's this? Elon responded, his voice calm but cautious. My name is Julian Cross, the man said. I work with a very powerful group that has been monitoring Gabriel Tanaka for some time. We know what you've uncovered, and we're willing to help you take him down. But we need something from you in return. Elon's heart skipped a beat. What do you want? We want your public support. We need you to back our initiative for global transparency in the energy sector. If you help us push for it, we'll make sure Tanaka goes down without a trace. If not, well, let's just say your project will face more opposition than you could ever imagine. The voice on the other end was cold, calculated. It was clear that they were trying to manipulate Elon, using his project as leverage to further their own agenda. I don't negotiate with threats, Elon said firmly. I'm taking Tanaka down, no matter what. There was a pause on the other end of the line before the voice returned, a hint of amusement in it. We'll see how long that resolve lasts, Mr. Musk. With that, the line went dead. Elon sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling in. He knew that they were playing a dangerous game now. Tanaka wasn't just a business adversary, he was part of a much larger, more powerful network of players who would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. As if the situation weren't complicated enough, now there was a shadowy group threatening to expose not just Tanaka, but the entire global energy grid project. The hours that followed were a blur of decisions. Elon and Gwyn had to act quickly, knowing that they were facing enemies on multiple fronts. The threat from Julian Cross and his group loomed large, but they also knew that exposing Tanaka's criminal activities was still the best option. By the time dawn broke, Elon knew that the battle had only just begun. Elon Musk was no stranger to high-pressure situations, but as the days passed, the weight of the choices he had made began to take a toll. The global energy grid project, once a beacon of hope for sustainable energy, now seemed more like a tightrope walk, one wrong move, and it could all come crashing down. With Gabriel Tanaka's shadow looming larger by the minute, and the mysterious group led by Julian Cross making threats, Elon was beginning to feel as though he was being pulled in every direction. The first order of business was to address Tanaka directly. After the tense meeting in New York, Elon knew there was no turning back. He had seen Tanaka's true face. He was no longer just a partner in the energy project, he was an adversary. But despite the bombshell information that had come to light, Elon knew he couldn't just expose Tanaka. Not yet. The stakes were too high, and the consequences of a public confrontation would be catastrophic. Elon's mind was racing. What if the global energy grid became collateral damage in a war between him and Tanaka? The project's future depended on more than just energy technology, it depended on trust, alliances, and careful navigation through the ever-shifting world of geopolitics. With Tanaka's influence and the threat from Julian Cross looming, Elon couldn't afford to make a rash move. He had to think several steps ahead. Meanwhile, Gwyn was busy following up on the mysterious phone call they had received from Julian Cross. The shadowy figure had made it clear that they were well aware of Tanaka's dealings and had their own agenda. Cross had tried to manipulate Elon into backing their push for global energy transparency, using Tanaka as a bargaining chip. It was a classic power play, but Elon wasn't one to be manipulated. "We need to know who's behind Julian Cross and what they really want," Gwyn said one evening as she sat across from Elon in his private office. "They're playing a dangerous game, and we can't afford to underestimate them." Elon leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "I agree. We can't trust anyone right now. We need to keep our options open, but we also need to be prepared for whatever comes next. One thing is clear, if we want to get Tanaka out of the picture, we need to be smarter than him." The next few days were a whirlwind of phone calls, meetings, and covert investigations. Elon's team was working overtime to gather information on both Tanaka and Julian Cross. Meanwhile, Elon had reached out to a few trusted allies within the government and tech industries to assess the political landscape. There was a growing sense that this wasn't just about a business deal anymore, it was about something much larger. Elon had always prided himself on thinking outside the box, on taking risks that others weren't willing to take. But this? This was a game of survival. One night, as Elon was reviewing reports from his team, he received another encrypted call. This time, it was a number he recognized, Gabriel Tanaka. "Elon," Tanaka said smoothly, as if their previous conversation had never happened. "I think we need to have another chat. I'm sure you've been busy with the project, but I'd appreciate your attention for a moment." Elon didn't hesitate. "I'm listening." "I've been hearing some troubling rumors, Elon," Tanaka continued, his voice filled with mock concern. "I've been made aware that you've been digging into my business affairs. Now, I'm sure you realize that this could have consequences, both for the energy grid project and for your reputation." Elon kept his tone steady. "I'm not intimidated by threats, Tanaka. You've made it clear who you are, and I've made it equally clear that I won't tolerate any more of your games. So, if you're trying to threaten me, I suggest you reconsider." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Tanaka's voice, when it returned, was colder. "This is more than just business, Elon. You've made a mistake. You don't realize the forces you're dealing with. If you continue down this path, you'll regret it." The line went dead. Elon hung up, his pulse racing. Tanaka's words had been laced with a threat, but it wasn't just Tanaka that Elon had to worry about. He had his own set of enemies now. The shadowy group led by Julian Cross was growing more vocal, and their demands were becoming more specific. Elon knew that whatever game Tanaka was playing, it was about to get a lot more complicated. As the hours ticked by, Elon found himself looking at the bigger picture. The global energy grid wasn't just about technology or innovation, it was about power. And in this game, power was something that could be taken away in an instant. The next morning, as Elon sat down to review a new set of documents, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unexpected message, a message from an anonymous source. The text read, "Meet me at the usual place. I have information that will change everything. Don't trust anyone. Especially Tanaka. Elon's stomach dropped. He had no idea who this could be, but he had his suspicions. He had received similar messages before, from people who claimed to know the inside story on Tanaka's activities. He didn't hesitate. He had to take the meeting. Whatever this person had to say, it was something that could alter the course of everything. The meeting took place in a dimly lit bar in a quiet part of the city. Elon sat at a corner booth, watching the door. A few minutes later, a man slid into the seat across from him. He was unremarkable, dressed in a simple suit, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap. Elon Musk, the man said in a low voice. I've been tracking Tanaka for a long time. I know what he's really up to. You're not the only one who's been investigating him. Elon leaned in, his curiosity piqued. What do you know? The man slid an envelope across the table, his eyes darting nervously. Everything you need to know. It's all in there. But be careful. Tanaka is connected to people who will stop at nothing to protect him. If you want to take him down, you have to be prepared for war. Elon grabbed the envelope and quickly opened it. Inside were more documents that revealed even deeper connections between Tanaka and powerful, shadowy organizations. It was worse than Elon had imagined. The truth was even more dangerous than he had anticipated. As the man stood up to leave, he looked over his shoulder and said, "One more thing. There's someone else involved. Someone who's been pulling the strings from the shadows. You need to find out who it is before it's too late." And with that, he was gone. Elon sat in the booth, staring at the envelope in his hands. Everything was beginning to unravel, and the deeper he went, the darker it became. He had known this fight wasn't going to be easy, but he had never expected it to escalate so quickly. The forces against him weren't just business rivals, they were powerful, unseen forces, with their own agendas and hidden motives. And as Elon turned the envelope over in his hands, he realized that the true battle was just beginning. Elon sat in his private office, the weight of the new revelations pressing heavily on him. The envelope from the anonymous source had contained more than just damning evidence about Gabriel Tanaka's criminal activities. It had hinted at something darker, something more insidious, the presence of a shadowy force pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Whoever this hidden hand was, they were far more dangerous than Tanaka. And that made the entire situation far more perilous. The morning after the meeting with the anonymous source, Elon called Gwyn into his office to discuss the new information. They needed to move quickly but carefully. Whoever was behind Tanaka's rise to power was someone with the kind of influence that could bring down not only their project but potentially even the governments of the countries involved. This was no longer just about business, it was about survival. "I've got something," Gwyn said as she entered the room, her voice tense. "I traced the anonymous contact back to a small network of operatives, people who've been monitoring Tanaka for years. They're connected to some very powerful figures." Elon looked up, his mind already racing through possibilities. "What's their endgame? What do they want from me?" "That's the question, Elon," Gwyn replied. "We don't know for sure yet, but we're digging into it. One thing is clear, though, they're not acting out of kindness. They want something from you, whether it's your influence, your technology, or something else entirely." Elon nodded, deep in thought. He had always known that power came with a price, but this was different. This wasn't about a simple business deal gone wrong. This was about forces far larger than he had ever imagined, and now, they were playing a game of shadows. He could feel the walls closing in on him from all sides. Later that evening, as Elon was reviewing his plans for the next phase of the global energy grid rollout, he received an unexpected message. It was from an encrypted number, a message that made his heart skip a beat. "We know what you're doing, Elon. And we can help you, but you need to make a choice. We can give you the resources to expose Tanaka, but you need to align yourself with us. Your project, your future, it all depends on it. Choose wisely. The message was chilling in its clarity. Whoever was behind this group knew everything, and they were offering to help him, at a cost. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to manipulate him with promises of support, but the way this was phrased felt different. It was almost as if they were waiting for him to take the bait. Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. What were his options? He couldn't trust anyone completely, but the possibility of finally taking down Tanaka and his shadowy benefactors was tempting. Still, aligning himself with this mysterious group might be just as dangerous as going it alone. Gwyn returned to his office a short while later, her face grim. Elon, I've got something you need to see. She handed him a folder filled with new intelligence, data that exposed a shocking truth. The hidden force behind Tanaka was more powerful than anyone had anticipated. They were a part of a global consortium of influential figures, many of whom had their hands in various industries, energy, tech, even military. This consortium had long-standing ties to governments and multinational corporations, and they had been operating in the shadows for years. They've been pulling the strings on several global crises, shaping the world to their advantage, Gwyn said, her voice filled with disbelief. Tanaka was just their puppet, but now they're targeting you. They see the global energy grid as a threat to their monopoly on power, and they won't let it succeed without a fight. Elon stood up, his mind processing the information. So they're trying to take me down, but why go after me now? I've been in the public eye for years, why are they acting now? Gwyn paused, flipping through the papers. The timeline is a bit blurry, but my guess is that they've been watching you for a while. You've been shaking things up in the energy sector, and now that your grid project is gaining momentum, you're a threat to their control. They can't afford to let you succeed. Elon's pulse quickened. And this group, you think they're behind the threats I've been getting? It's the most likely scenario, Gwyn said. They want to control the future of energy, and they'll stop at nothing to maintain their grip on it. They've made it clear that they'll fight dirty. The weight of the situation settled heavily on Elon's shoulders. He had faced countless challenges in his career, but this was different. The stakes were higher. His vision of a global, sustainable energy grid wasn't just about saving the planet, it was about disrupting an entrenched system of power that had controlled the world for decades. But with enemies now coming from all directions, Elon realized that he couldn't do it alone. He needed allies, but the question was, who could he trust? Over the next few days, Elon made a series of covert calls. His allies in the government, as well as a few trusted figures in the tech industry, were on alert. The whispers of the hidden force behind Tanaka's rise to power were growing louder, and it was clear that they were willing to do whatever it took to eliminate Elon as a threat. He had to act fast. Meanwhile, the mysterious group that had contacted him was growing more insistent, sending more cryptic messages and offering support. They knew everything about him, his past, his plans, his vulnerabilities, and they weren't afraid to use that knowledge against him. Elon had no choice but to consider their offer seriously. But as the days passed, his paranoia began to set in. Was aligning with them a smart move? Or was it just another trap? He couldn't be sure, but he knew one thing, he couldn't take down Tanaka without taking on the hidden force behind him. In the midst of this turmoil, Elon received a call that made his blood run cold. It was from an unknown number, but the voice on the other end was unmistakable. Elon, Tanaka said, his tone dripping with menace. You think you're playing the game, but you're only a pawn. You have no idea what's coming for you. No one does. But soon, you'll see that you're in over your head. Elon felt a chill run down his spine. He had been prepared for Tanaka to fight back, but this was different. Tanaka wasn't just a businessman anymore. He was a puppet master, and his strings were pulling the entire world toward a dark, uncertain future. That night, Elon sat in his office, staring at the world map on the wall. He had always believed in the power of technology to change the world, but now, he was beginning to see how deep the rabbit hole went. The global energy grid was more than just a project, it was the battleground for the future of humanity itself. But as the walls closed in, Elon realized that his greatest challenge wasn't the global energy grid. It was the hidden hand, those powerful figures who had been manipulating the world from the shadows for decades. They had always been in control, and now they were fighting to keep it that way. The tension was unbearable. Elon had faced many challenges in his career, from self-doubt to fierce competition, but nothing had ever felt as overwhelming as this. As he sat in his office, looking out over the city skyline, he couldn't shake the feeling that his entire life had been building toward this one, crucial moment. Everything, the energy grid project, his fight against Tanaka, and the shadowy forces manipulating events from the shadows, had led to this confrontation. The pieces were finally coming together, but as the truth about Tanaka and the hidden consortium began to reveal itself, Elon found himself at a crossroads. It wasn't just about exposing corruption anymore. It was about survival, and the future of the world. For the past few days, Elon had been working with his most trusted allies to compile every shred of evidence that could bring down Tanaka and the group controlling him. The anonymous messages, the documents Gwyn had uncovered, and the connections between Tanaka and the global consortium, all of it was starting to fit into a clear picture. But the deeper Elon dug, the more dangerous it became. It wasn't just the people he could see that were his enemies, it was the ones hiding in the shadows, pulling strings from far away. The phone buzzed on his desk, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a secure call, the same encrypted number he'd seen several times now, the mysterious group that had been watching him for weeks. Elon answered the call, his voice steady but wary. "What do you want?" "You're getting closer, Elon," the voice on the other end said. "We can see that. But you're also taking risks. Every step you take brings you closer to the truth, but it also brings you closer to danger. You need to decide if you're ready to expose the full extent of this." Elon's mind raced. "I'm ready. I'll take down Tanaka. And if this group has been involved in any of this, I'll expose them too." The voice on the other end was silent for a moment, then spoke again. "Exposing Tanaka is the easy part. It's the people behind him that you need to worry about. They'll stop at nothing to protect their interests. If you want to survive, you need to understand what you're up against." "I'm not afraid of them," Elon replied, his resolve hardening. "If I'm going down, I'm taking them with me." Elon ended the call and stood up from his desk, pacing back and forth. The enormity of what he was about to do weighed on him, but there was no turning back now. Tanaka's actions had crossed a line, and the global energy grid was far too important to be held hostage by greed and power. It wasn't just a matter of his own success or failure anymore, it was about changing the world for the better. The next few days were a blur of intense strategy meetings, media plans, and legal preparations. Gwyn and the team had compiled irrefutable evidence linking Tanaka to a network of corrupt leaders, officials, and even intelligence agencies. The proof was damning. But more than that, they had evidence of the group that had been secretly pulling the strings behind the scenes. This was bigger than Tanaka, it was an international conspiracy, one that could topple governments and change the course of history. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Elon knew that he had a window of opportunity, an opportunity to expose the truth before they could silence him. But he also knew that he had to be strategic. This wouldn't be a battle won by brute force, it would be one with information, timing, and precision. The day of the public reveal arrived, and Elon stood before the cameras in his office, flanked by Gwyn and his legal team. The press conference was set to be live-streamed worldwide, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. He had been preparing for this moment for weeks, but even so, the gravity of what he was about to do hit him harder than he had anticipated. He glanced at Gwyn, who gave him a reassuring nod. He could trust her, and that, in itself, was a rarity in his world. Together, they had worked tirelessly to uncover the truth, and now they were ready to share it with the world. "Elon," Gwyn said quietly, "are you sure about this? Once it's out there, there's no going back." Elon nodded, his expression resolute. It's the only way. The truth has to come out. The world needs to know who's really behind all of this. They need to see the damage they've caused, and the power they've held over people's lives for too long. As the cameras began rolling, Elon took a deep breath and addressed the audience. His voice was calm, but beneath it, there was an undeniable urgency. The time for playing nice had passed. It was time to take down the enemies who had been hiding in the shadows for too long. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me today, Elon began. We are here today not just to talk about technology or innovation, but to talk about something much larger. Something that threatens the future of our world and the very ideals we stand for. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle in. For years, we've seen how monopolies in the energy sector have held our world hostage. How a few powerful people have controlled our future by manipulating technology, governments, and the media. And today, I stand before you to expose the truth about Gabriel Tanaka, and the secret consortium of power brokers that have been operating in the shadows. He flicked through a series of slides, revealing the evidence that had been painstakingly gathered: financial transactions, covert meetings, intelligence reports, and detailed plans that linked Tanaka to the global conspiracy. The room was silent as the world watched in shock. This is not just about business, Elon continued. This is about our future. About the kind of world we want to leave behind for future generations. We can no longer allow these forces to control our destiny. We can no longer allow people like Gabriel Tanaka, or the hidden hands pulling his strings, to continue operating unchecked. As the press conference continued, the evidence poured out, undeniable and overwhelming. Each revelation was more shocking than the last. The media was in chaos, but Elon had planned for this. He had prepared the world for the truth, and now it was here. When the press conference finally ended, Elon felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. He had done it. He had exposed the corruption, the lies, and the conspiracy. The world would never be the same. But as the days passed, Elon realized that the battle was far from over. Tanaka, the consortium, and their shadowy allies were not going to go down without a fight. They had resources, power, and influence, and they would do everything in their power to discredit Elon and protect their hold on the world. The fight was just beginning, and Elon Musk knew that he was stepping into a new kind of war, one where every move mattered, and every decision could mean the difference between victory and defeat. But no matter what came next, Elon knew one thing for sure: the truth had been exposed, and the world would never be the same again. Elon Musk had taken the first step toward dismantling a global conspiracy that had been controlling the energy sector and the world itself for decades. But as the dust settled, one question remained: would exposing the truth be enough to topple the giants behind the shadows, or would they strike back harder than ever before? Stay tuned for what happens next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. What do you think the future holds for Elon? Will the forces behind Tanaka succeed in their retaliation?